across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Yeah, good afternoon. 3 minutes after 1 o'clock. Welcome to the home of common sense. Thank you to Alex. Back soon, right here on Talk. Coming up this afternoon, there is no such thing, listen to these words, there's no such thing as a war on motorists. This is according to the Labour government, with Transport Secretary Heidi Alexander insisting she's tackling real problems, not inventing one, despite new car taxes, 20-mile-an-hour zones, God knows how many expanded low-traffic neighbourhoods. The list goes on. But there is no war on motorists. Would you like to counter that argument from the Secretary of State? We're all ears at this end. Also this afternoon, Birmingham residents are burning rubbish as bin bags continue to pile up during a citywide strike. It's raising fears of toxic fumes and fires, not to mention the rats who are building their own housing estate, it seems, as we speak. Full details on the way. And Britain faces permanent 10% tariffs on exports to the US and US goods to a reciprocal 125%. Does this thing just cancel each other out in the end? Where does it finish? Where does it end? Our lines are open. Everything you need to know, all the breaking news right here on Talk 0344 499 1000. There is no war on... Is there a war on motorists? I mean, just consider this. If you drive for a living, whether you drive a car, or a lot of our listeners will be driving around in vans and trucks as well, just give us an overview. Give me an overview of what it's costing you just to run four wheels. There was never anything controversial about driving a car. Even insurance, it was always known that insurance was, a little bit more pricey when you've just passed your test. And then after a couple of years, it sort of panned out. But there weren't these heady discussions about, have you seen the car? It's doubled, it's tripled, etc. That's just one aspect of it. Labour says there's no such thing as a war on motorists, despite millions of drivers now hit with all manner of other taxes. This is Heidi Alexander, the Transport Secretary, insisted in a speech last night that there's no such thing as using car and van drivers as cash cows, or that everyone needs to use public transport. But to working families, of course, who are spending God knows how much money on the road, the war is very, very real. So since Labour came to power, they've backed God knows how many 20-mile-an-hour zones. They've rolled out more low-traffic neighbourhoods, hiked car tax as well across the board. Even clean electric vehicles have been slapped with £190 annual charge, not to mention Sadiq Khan's ULEZ expansion across Greater London, plus all of those other emission zones around the country. The list goes on. If you want to drive just into London in the day, it'll cost you £12.50 just to get there. Unbelievable. Labour's new car tax raid is expected to rake in an extra £1.7 billion. But apparently there's no war on motorists. The cost of insurance, road tax, petrol, car parking, those congestion charges, the emissions charges I just mentioned, speed cameras all over the place, 20-mile-an-hour zones wherever you look. Some roads blocked up altogether in those low-traffic neighbourhoods. But there's no war on motorists, so they tell us. Look, every government is no different, really. They know that they can whack up road tax. There can be taxation applied to insurance, or the insurance companies that slap on. I swear insurance has gone up because insurance companies have gone, well, everyone is expecting things to go up, so we might as well stick it up. And they have. Well, we know that they can stick it, but that's the reality. We all pay it because we have to, or we break the law. So in this speech last night, in York, the Transport Secretary invoked the words of the former socialist mayor of Bogota, that's the capital of Colombia, by the way, Enrique Peñalosa. Enrique Peñalosa once said, an advanced city is not one where the poor have to own a car, but one where the rich choose to use public transport. Heidi Alexander said, that is my vision and the one I believe in. She's bonkers. Poor people do have cars, by the way, and I don't know how you're measuring poor people. That's quite a lot of people these days. And not all rich people want to use public transport. It's the 21st century. Get around however you want to. But when you're having the tax having the price and the tax that goes with it coming at you at 100 miles an hour in all directions, you are forced to think there's a bit of a war on this thing. Heidi Alexander says that this idea that you have to use public transport is nonsense. She says, but I can picture the headlines now. She said, so let me counter the column inches before they emerge. There's no such thing as a war on motorists. She said she isn't suggesting everyone jumps on a bike or be forced to use public transport. She said, no serious person is proposing to ask people like my dad, a self-employed electrician, to swap their van for a bus, forcing them to lug all their kit around. I'm certainly not. Well, I don't think that's the way you answer the question. If you drive for a living, even if you just use, in fact, when you're just using your car, you know, going to and fro to the supermarket, not everybody lives near a supermarket, not everybody has a bus route to the supermarket, and even if they did, you want to lug all your shopping on a bus, so you might be able to do it at a quiet time if your route is near your house. That's not always practical. You have to get around. There's nothing wrong with a car. Why are we apologising for the use of a car? And why are we having this conversation when public transport in this country is so bad and so expensive that you have to sort of laugh when any politician even echoes or suggests that public transport is the way forward? Because it really isn't. In cities, if you're in Manchester, you can get around on a tram. If you're in London, you can get around on a tube. But even there, not everywhere will suit you. Of course, big cities are conducive with public transport. We all know that. That's how they function. It's better for everybody in some respects, but not all respects. People have to drive into the city. People deliver stuff. Some people work certain hours where driving makes sense. You've got to get to work. You know, if you look at the capital city, you know, people commute daily from Wales and beyond to get into the capital. People drive, you know, a long distance, couple of hours each way to get to work. And that would apply all over the country. They say there's no war on motorists. I think if you look at what stuff costs, when I was on holiday last week in Bulgaria, I was clocking the price of petrol, made me want to weep, just looking at the basic way things are. I didn't see a speed camera. All the while I was there, I didn't see a single speed camera on the road. And whilst, you know, no one wants to see a half-wit doing 80 miles an hour in a 30, simultaneously, you don't want to live under a government where if you happen to hit the gas to the tune of 2 or 3 miles an hour, you're going to get a letter courtesy of the digital police. So there was none of that. It was kind of felt like it used to be here a little bit in that respect. So whilst it was a bit clunky and a bit creaky as a country, there was something gorgeous about all of that. There was a kind of an innocence. It's like, wait, this is what the UK used to be. It didn't mess around with fining people if they put a single foot out of place via cameras and all manner of other technological contraptions. 0344 499 1000. That is where you'll find us. Just give me an overview of what it's costing you to function with a motor. A car, a van, a truck, whatever it happens to be. The hiking of insurance is really interesting to me. Why would that be? The last time, because your insurance can double quite a lot and you have to go on those websites and have a little shop around. Last year when I went to renew and had a shop around, the options didn't appear to be there. Previously, they were always, you know, wow, this one wants 1,200 quid, but there's one here for 400 quid. It's amazing. I'm glad that was gone. I couldn't find that differential in any compelling way. The cost of filling up your car. These are bits of the cost of living that we tend to forget about. Well, have you ever done written down your monthly outgoings? And then you write down your monthly outgoings and then you write down your lifestyle. So in addition to everything you have to get, like you've got to pay your bills, etc., then you look at stuff you do, all the little extras. You can throw in everything from dog food to, you know, a bloke that might clean your windows or something. You know, all of that stuff. You add it in and it all mounts up. And petrol is one of those that you just have to get anyway. Because if your car's run out, you have to fill it up. And then you realise at the end of the month, wow, I spent that on petrol. I haven't been anywhere. 0344 499 1000. Let's get a word on this and the other big stories of the day. Callum Price, Director of Communications at the IEA, is with us, former Special Advisor, of course, in government. Callum, good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon, how are you doing?
I'm all right. I mean, the war on motorist line has been there forever. I don't know whether you were ever privy to a secret meeting in government where they said this is the war on motorist meeting, and it was written on the door and everybody got the memo, come and join the war on motorist meeting. I'm sure it doesn't happen like that, but it is true to say that it's a good old target, isn't it, the motorist, because you can whack up things like road tax and no one's going to really argue.
Well, yeah, pretty much. I mean, to be clear, I didn't ever quite attend a meeting of that nature in government. But I think the fact that the Transport Secretary has felt the need to point out proactively in a speech there is no war on motorists is a sign that there just might be.
Yes.
And it's also, just in terms of a comms strategy, not exactly the best thing to be pointing at put a big glaring, shining, pointing arrow towards the thing that you don't want people to say by saying it yourself. But you're absolutely right that it's an easy place to raise money, and the government, as it continues to increase spending left, right, and centre, has to find a way to raise that money. But actually, the interesting development from now, compared to say a year ago, is the change in government and where the political party that is in government thinks it can raise money. It's interesting that Hadi Alexander talks about her strategy being about cities. It's because where all the Labour voters are. There are fewer people driving in cities because of public transport being better and all those sorts of things, and that's where Labour voters are. There are less Labour voters, although many people are Labour voters since July last year, but classically Labour voters in rural areas and places where cars are much more needed. So Labour think they effectively even have to pay even less of a price by hitting motorists than the Tories did. Compare this with other areas of government action in recent months. And the similarities are quite clear. They say as much as possible, we're pro-business, we're on the side of business, and then they raise taxes on business, raise employment regulations, raise minimum wage. They say we're pro-growth, but we're going to do all those things. And then they also say, actually, no, we're not against farmers. And then their actions say something else. Farmers, business people who drive aren't classically people that vote Labour.
100%. Well, she says there is no war on motorists. It's worth having a listen here, Callum, to some of Labour's non-attacks on motorists. Here they are.
Although a London-wide ULEZ is clearly the best approach, I passionately believe it's the right course of action.
This is about getting green vehicles on the road so that we can bring down the emissions.
And I think when it comes to green commitments, it's not a question of whether they should be done. Of course they need to be done.
Some of you have got good reasons to oppose ULEZ, but you're in coalition with COVID deniers, you're in coalition with the far right, and you're in coalition with vaccine deniers as well.
I was actually standing outside that building when Khan made that speech, bizarrely, Callum. I mean, that was an extraordinary moment, but it did feel, and certainly the Mayor of London has really taken the battle of the motorist to new levels with his sort of ULEZ proclivities, the expansion of it as well. You've got to pay for that bit, you've got to pay for the congestion. If you've got the wrong kind of car, you've got to pay extra on your car parking. Your fuel will cost you a fortune. I mean, it could cost you 120 quid a day just to drive into London.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think that the government is coming at this from the wrong way. They say they're billing it as it's an either-or between public transport or between driving and roads. But actually, we need better of both. And we can have that. It is possible. We do need better public transport links, particularly in other cities around the country and between those cities. But we also need better roads and those roads to function better. And there are alternatives to the way that has to be done. It doesn't necessarily have to be government doling out money. And I'm in favour of the principle of a road pricing structure. In France, they have amazing motorways and they use tolls. Like that is something that can work. But the quid pro quo for that is that those motorways are then excellent to drive on. They're kept up well. They get you there quickly. They're not that busy. But Britain has chosen a sort of socialist model where we run it all through the government. It's given quotes and quotes for free, but it's paid for by taxes left, right and centre. Absolutely.
We're talking of taxes or tariffs. Let's move to this story. Britain faces permanent 10% tariffs on US exports, even if we do a trade deal, as ministers are growing fairly doubtful of securing an exemption on Trump's trade measures. Let's have a listen to the President. Trump speaking to Fox News about the T word.
We have been treated so badly by other countries because we had stupid leadership that allowed this to happen. They took our businesses, they took our money, they took our jobs, They moved it to Mexico. They moved it to Canada. They moved a lot of it to China. And it's not sustainable. We're not going to do it. Now we have hundreds of billions of dollars is pouring into our country on a monthly basis. It's pouring. It's already started because they put tariffs on. And eventually it's going to straighten out and our country will be solid and strong again.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot in what he said there, Callum, that doesn't quite... I don't know why there's hundreds of billions of dollars coming into America when it will be the American company or the consumer, ultimately, that is paying that money for those goods to come in. Not quite sure what maths he's doing there.
Yeah, I think it's as a rule of thumb, when Trump starts talking about trade, you could just sort of zone out for a moment. I think what the government needs to do, our government that is, needs to do is just to make sure that they don't accept the premise and the ground that Trump is fighting on with trade. It isn't a win-lose situation. This isn't they're doing better, therefore we must be doing worse. Trade is that. It's a trade. It's you give something and get something in return. It's not giving things away. So we talk about tariffs and how the government should respond and whether we'll be able to negotiate a deal or whatnot. What the government needs to do is give the best possible deal it can do to the Americans, because that is a good deal for the Brits as well. If we have a system whereby we can get cheap goods from America, that is a good thing because that brings costs down for the average consumer. That makes us better off. That means we can do more. We can get more with spending the same amount or even less. So the government's doing a good job so far of not rising to Trump's bait in the same way that China has, the same way the European Union has. But it must continue to do that, I think, because otherwise you accept his terms, and as soon as you're fighting on his ground, then you will lose, as will he.
It's extraordinary, isn't it? I mean, if you're a Trump sort of fanboy, then it doesn't matter what he does, there'll be nothing wrong with it. He's one of those leaders. There's a few of them out there that somehow invoke this kind of messianic worship thing, where no matter how crazy or mad something might be, he put a post on social media saying, you know, today is a good day to buy or something like that, talking about shares. I mean, no president should be doing that. I mean, that's, you know, the north end of pretty outrageous stuff. And then there he was in the Oval Office congratulating a couple of his mates making $2.5 million in a day on the markets. I mean, this is not a good look. But those that stand by Trump at every level regardless don't see it like that. They're kind of, no, he knows what he's doing. Nothing wrong if his mate made $2.5 million. That's fine.
Yeah, it's slightly crazy. I mean, it's more than slightly crazy, to be frank. But actually, what's really interesting is watching Trump go backwards and forwards on why he's doing the tariffs and also whether he's going to do them at all. So it's we're not going to pause, we're not going to pause, we're not going to pause, and everyone, all of his fans are sort of saying yes, good, right, that's the mission. And then he pauses, and everyone's going right, well played, art of the deal, well done. Isn't he playing everybody perfectly? It's chaotic. And it's indefensible in many ways. And what people should be doing is looking at the evidence and looking at what will the effect of these things be. We know what that will be because it's been evidence for hundreds of years at this point in economic theory and in outcomes. Tariffs harm, and free trade brings prosperity and growth to everybody. So that's the way we should go about it.
Callum, stay with us. Callum Price is with us looking at the big stories of the day. Over to you as well. The war on motorists. Just talk to me about driving, the expenditure, the hike in prices, whether it's insurance, road tax. What happened to that? You know, it used to be 40 quid for half a year, 80 quid for a year. I don't think it mattered at one point what car you drove. Then they sort of divvied that up a little bit. If you're driving a big old Range Rover Sport, it's probably 600 or 700 quid a year now. I don't know what the cost is for that kind of thing, but I wouldn't mind betting it is. 0344 499 1000, 20 past 1. This is Talk.
we should have racist policies for hiring police because these people come to this country and don't learn English. Doesn't seem the right priority at all.
Julia, it's not racist. It's perfectly legal under the Equalities Act 2010 to have positive action.
It's racist. It might be legally racist, but it's racist.
Well, how is it racist, Julia? Giving somebody else, allowing them, giving them the opportunity to apply, helping them.
If you discriminate between people based on the colour of their skin, that's racism.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This one comes in from Duncan in Milton Keynes. How you doing, Duncan? He says that we run a small business with 2 vans running 5 days a week. The vans are our biggest expense: fuel, insurance, maintenance, congestion and green charges, road tax and finance. Totals around about 12,000 quid per year, per van. That cost has risen by about 1,000 quid per van over the last 3 or 4 years, with no sign of it ever going the other way. Heidi Alexander needs to give her head a wobble. Duncan, thank you for that. And I sense that story is probably replica. Anyone who runs a business where you rely on some form of transportation, like vans, whether it's a couple or a fleet of them, I can imagine that's your biggest single expense. Callum Price is with us. We're having a look at the big stories of the day. What about this one, Callum? An immigration judge has reposted calls to decriminalise illegal migration to the UK. Let's have a listen firstly to Keir Starmer speaking just at the end of March on this very issue.
We must pull every lever available, and that is what this Labour government is doing. No shortcuts, no gimmicks. Just the hard graft of sleeves rolled up, practical government, securing our borders, getting a grip on illegal migration, and delivering our plan for change. We want to work with you and with everyone who is as determined as we are to end the misery and evil of people smuggling, because together we will save lives, we will secure our borders, we will smash the gangs that undermine our security, and deliver the fairness for the working people that we serve.
Well, that's what he says. The judge who oversees asylum appeals reposted calls to decriminalise illegal migration. Before his appointment, he supported reversing Brexit, made controversial remarks online, including comparing Conservatives to Nazis. I think we can sort of roughly get, Callum, where this guy is coming from. But it's a little extraordinary, I always sense, much in the way we just sort of suggested that maybe Donald Trump talking about it's a good time to buy on the stock market. Similarly, when I hear a judge make proclamations like this, I'm a little uneasy.
Absolutely, and we all should be. The independence of the judiciary is a sort of cornerstone of what makes this country great, what makes a democracy function. The rule of law is absolutely key. That politicians cannot interfere with how a judge makes their decisions or with the judges in any way. That's been the principle in the UK for hundreds of years, and quite rightly. But independence of the judiciary and depoliticisation of the judiciary is a two-way street. I was a political advisor in the Ministry of Justice, advising the Lord Chancellor. The Lord Chancellor obviously has meetings with judges fairly regularly. I wasn't allowed in those meetings because I was political. That's absolutely fair and right. But it's a two-way street. So when judges are deemed to be getting involved in politics themselves, then that's a serious problem. They need to be, and to be seen to be, politically impartial on all matters if we are to trust them and the system in which they operate to deliver fair and right justice, which is exactly what they're there for. And as soon as they stop doing that, then confidence is crushed and the system begins to fall apart.
Indeed. Well, this fella, Judge Greg O'Caddick KC, did his name ever cross the the meeting room when you were in government?
Not to my recollection, no.
Yeah, no, I just wondered whether this fella had form. But his post may violate judicial social media guidelines issued by Dame Sue Carr, discouraging active use due to reputational risks. So there is already, a question mark over the comments he's making. We'll watch with interest, but I think many people won't be that surprised to know that there's at least one judge out there who's a bit of a lefty. Let's move to this story then. Birmingham, God knows what's happening in Birmingham. They can't seem to get this right. We've now got residents burning rubbish as the bags and the garbage is piling high. Residents are taken to setting fire to it, presumably with an aim of getting rid of it. But of course, that in itself is a problem because you'd end up with toxic fumes, fires, and potential danger to life and buildings.
Yeah, it's not a pretty sight at all. And what's going on in Birmingham more broadly is clearly not working. I mean, people are paying their council tax and not getting the services that they've paid for. The strike that I think it's Unite the Union are running is ongoing, but needs to end as quickly as possible. I don't see what the end in sight would be, but I think them holding a council and its citizens to ransom like this is obviously no good thing. And there needs to be a solution found quickly. I don't have all the answers to what that solution would be, but clearly nobody wants to be seeing scenes like this.
Indeed. Listen, Callum, thank you. Have a cracking weekend. He's Callum Price, Director of Communications at the IEA, former Special Advisor in Government as well. Thank you to him. Over to you. Any of those stories you want to chip in on, we're all ears at this end. In particular, that question at the beginning, is there a war on motorists? It sounds like a crazy question. There demonstrably is a war on motorists. I'm not saying, by the way, that this government is any different to any other, but we're now in an era, as we've moved through the years, and I think most of us, if you're sort of middle-aged and older, you're in a good position to be able to plot this, because there were times when you sort of felt genuinely aware of the tangible connection between your tax and what it was purporting to do. So you paid your road tax and it was fixing the roads. And then a while back they went, no, we're just going to shove it into one big pot. We won't hypothecate it just to roads. We'll just stick it all in the big mixer, and then we'll just give the road department some money, which is bound to be less than the amount of road tax you pay. And then some bright spot thought, oh yeah, this car thing, it's like really, there's a lot of people now with two cars. I think there's a lot of money to be made here. People like cars. And this, I suppose, is post-war and beyond. So if you're like me, a child of the 70s, you remember very well when road tax was like 40 quid for half a year and 80 for 1 year. You remember that insurance, the only real debate about insurance being expensive would be if you just passed your test, and that's still the same because you're a new driver, or if somebody had bought some. There was a fella around the corner from us. Do you remember the Ford Escort? Was it called an XR3? I think it was. It was the Ford Escort XR3, and it was a right tasty bit of kit. It wasn't really, looking back, it was a heap of junk, but at the time it looked like a taste. And this fella had one in black with the alloy wheels. It was absolutely super. He smashed it up after about 3 weeks, no surprise. But that thing cost him I can't remember what the cost was. It was ridiculous to insure this zooped up thing. He was about 18. And it cost an arm and a leg. But they were the only areas of controversy around this. We didn't really look at it as, you just paid your insurance. It wasn't really seen as a big money spinner in the way it is now. All of that has fed into this war on motorists, which the government, Heidi Alexander, Transport Secretary, says there is no war on motorists. Your stories on that, 0344 499 1000.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
0344 499 1000. This comes in from Howard, who says, I love this. He says, in 1973-74, I was earning £24 a week, equivalent to around about 18,000 in 2020 a year, in 2025. I was paying a mortgage. I was running a Ford Corsair. I went out 4 or 5 times a week. Now tell me that the country is not an expensive economic nightmare. It's that, isn't it? When we were kids, my mum didn't go to work. She was a housewife. And this wasn't born out of some kind of luxury that my dad was earning loads of money, because he definitely wasn't. It was more of the kind of tradition of that role. She did eventually become a dinner lady, so she, it's not like she never worked. And then got a job in a godforsaken factory for some bizarre reason. We never knew why she did that, but she did. But we could still, despite having naff all, we could still go on a little holiday. And, times were a bit tough and it was a bit tight in lots of areas. And my dad ran a car. And that wasn't really marked out as being controversial. I remember if something went wrong with it, there was a little bit of a conversation. Oh, God, we've got to get the Hillman Hunter repaired. Sounds like the 1920s. But yeah, people could do that. I've often cited the case of my sister leaving school, met her partner, who's now her husband of many years. She worked as an office junior. He was a forklift driver, and the two of them bought a house. And they saved up for a deposit and they bought a house. 2 people in that job today could not ever buy a house. Really couldn't. You'd have to be saving for probably about 30 years. Just for the deposit. 0344 499 1000. So Labour claiming there is no such thing as a war on motorists. Doesn't exist. It's in your minds. Despite millions of drivers facing higher car taxes, 20 mile an hour zones, there's low traffic neighbourhoods, you've got all sorts of initiatives as regards congestions and emission zones, the cost of insuring your car, the cost of filling it up with petrol, etc. The list goes on. Heidi Alexander, the Transport Secretary, said in a speech last night, she was talking in York, she said she's focused on real problems, not invented ones, dismissing concerns about tradesmen being forced to swap their vans for a bus. Well, nobody is saying that, but you are sort of sometimes forced to feel a little bit like that. Critics argue the cost tells a different story, with Labour backing ULEZ expansion, a £190 annual tax on electric vehicles. What are you paying that for, by the way? And policies expected to bring in about £1.7 billion from... These are increased measures from drivers' pockets. Lots to talk about on this. Let's chat to Norman Baker, former Transport Minister. Norman, good afternoon to you.
Hello, Ian. Good to see you.
And good to see you again too. Did you ever have a tally when you were Transport Minister as how often this phrase war on motorists cropped up?
It cropped up a lot. It was a very tired, cliched phrase, to be honest with you.
I'm sure.
It's rolled out every couple of months by the Conservatives in particular. And it doesn't actually stack up, I have to say. Look, I'm in favour of making sure that motorists aren't exploited. And when I was a minister, for example, I banned private sector wheel clamping, which was an absolute disgrace at the time by cowboys. And I also took steps to try and deal with private parking companies who were not behaving properly towards motorists. So there are matters to be dealt with. But, the reality, if you look at the cost of motoring compared to the cost of public transport, the cost of motoring over 30 years, all governments, Tory, Labour, coalition, has risen far less than the cost of going by bus or by train. If there's a war on at the moment, it's a war on public transport users.
Do you think so? You're absolutely right. It is ridiculous costs for rail in this country. We've never seemed to be able to do that thing they do in everywhere from Russia to France of having affordable rail fares. I went to Darlington the other day, a couple of £100, I think the ticket was, just to get them. Extraordinary prices. That's more expensive than driving a car. You're right.
Yeah, they've gone up above inflation, more years than not. And, that drives people off the railways and onto the roads. And by the way, if it drives them onto the roads, it worsens congestion. But, fuel duty, for example, has been frozen. In fact, it's been cut since 2011. There's a temporary cut, so-called, in place at the moment. Rail fares have gone up every year. So, comparatively speaking, those who use buses and trains, bus fares have gone up £2 to £3 this year. They've been a lot worse off.
In terms of things like electric cars, which now there's now an annual levy on that.
Yeah.
Of course, at one point, one of the attractions of an electric car, Norman, was that there was no road tax on it, and that was fabulous because they weren't doing what ordinary petrol and diesel cars were doing. That's long gone, and it's now. The direction of travel will be that will increase annually, just like road tax increase annually, and that money doesn't go directly to repairing roads, right?
Well, there's a couple of things. First of all, I should say I paid no road tax on my car because I've got a 1971 Triumph Aero convertible,
nice,
which I've been out in today in the lovely sunshine. But the reality is that the amount of money taken from the motorist in terms of tax has actually been decreasing relative to inflation, certainly, because people have been moving from petrol and diesel cars onto electric cars. And of course, there hasn't been a charge on electric cars until very recently. And the Treasury's been losing lots of money. In fact, the so-called black hole that the Labour government keeps going on about, if fuel duty had risen by inflation every year since 2011, that black hole wouldn't exist. That's how much money the Treasury has lost. And it's looking at the situation where if all cars are electric in 10 years' time or 15 years' time, then what will happen is there's no money coming in unless they actually charge the electric vehicle for the same road tax as the petrol and diesel vehicles pay now. Now, I know it's uncomfortable because part of the attraction, as you say, Ian, is the electric vehicle has been free of road tax. But, realistically, the Treasury cannot lose £30 billion a year, which is what they're taking at the moment from fuel duty and VAT.
Is there there's another point here, though, isn't there, that it's harder for motorists in some respects, whether the expense issue stacks up, as you were just alluding to, Norman, but that things like low traffic neighbourhoods, things like it's not just London where we often focus on the ULEZ zone in London, but other cities have similar initiatives. We know that Andy Burnham is in Manchester is toying with all sorts of ideas in that area. It's the fact that wherever you turn, it feels, as a motorist, there's something. There's a camera that's either going to nab you for doing 2 miles an hour over the limit, it's going to nick you for the audacity of driving into your capital city, and then when you do so, if your car doesn't hit some man-made figure that Sadiq Khan's boys came up with, then it's going to charge you another £12.50, and then when you go to park your car, because you've got a slightly older vehicle, it's going to charge you more for the parking in certain boroughs as well. It could cost you £100 before you've even bought yourself a burger in Oxford Street.
Well, there are a lot of extra charges, and the one thing you mentioned earlier on, which I totally agree with, is the state of our roads. Not the main highways, which are run by the government, by the Highways Agency, Highways England now, or National Highways, I think it's called, keeps changing its name. But the local roads are an absolute disgrace in this country. You go to France, and the roads are perfect. They're flat as a pancake. Over here, you have to watch where you're driving because there are so many potholes around. So there's a real case to get more money into local authorities to get the roads sorted out. That's perfectly true. Now, if you have a good public transport option, as we do in some places, and it's well designed and it's fair, then that can be a good thing. It can work well with motorists because actually what you do is you provide a good alternative. People, if they want to switch, can switch. If they don't want to switch, they don't have to switch, and they can still drive around as they were before. That's a kind of perfect solution. And that sometimes works. It works in Brighton, actually, to a large degree, because there's fantastic public transport in Brighton. And it does mean that the number of cars on the road has diminished because they're on buses and trains. And that makes it easier for those who are still in their cars. That works well. But there are areas across the country where the incentives and initiatives have been taken, which actually are not well designed and cause problems. And obviously they need to be sorted out. Indeed. Norman, always great to get your take on these things. Thank you. He speaks from an experienced position as a former Transport Minister, Norman Baker. He says, set against the rate of inflation, it's actually cheaper to drive than it used to be. Well, I guess that depends which part of the dial you look at when you're trying to draw a conclusion on this one. We know that things like car insurance has gone up exponentially. I mean, it's ludicrous. Road tax is, it seems to me, the Treasury now use road tax almost in the same way as they, when there's a budget and they'll put
you know that the tax on cigarettes is going to go up. You kind of know the tax on road tax is going to go up as well. Let's get a word on that point. David Bailey, Professor of Business Economics at Birmingham Business School. David, good afternoon to you, sir.
Hello there.
Nice to have you with us. I mean, there is a little bit of that. There's mischief, isn't there, around the motorist, because they do know that, apart from those that don't bother with insurance and road tax, and I'm sure they're small in number, but they are out there, but if it goes up by 10 quid or 20 quid or even 50 quid a year, governments know you're going to pay it because you have to pay it because you need a car.
Well, that's absolutely right. And so, economists talk about these things where you've got inelastic demand. You're still going to consume the product even if the price goes up enough.
Yeah.
The governments tend to whack those things with a lot of tax because that's a great way of raising tax revenue. I thought Norman was very interesting. That was a terrific interview. And he's right in the sense the government has had to really freeze fuel duty for a long time because of the backlash against it. But there are lots of other costs that have gone up. It's very interesting when I see my students, and we talk about a lot of these things. And when I was at university a long time ago, many of us would have had cars. I asked the group of students today, hardly any do. And it's because of things like car insurance going up so much. But also there's alternatives for them. They can get into an Uber relatively cheaply. That didn't exist when I was a student. They can get on an electric scooter that they can hire. So, they can do other things. One of the things about car insurance is that the Competition and Markets Authority was meant to have stopped this tendency in the industry for home insurance as well, whereby you're with an insurer and they almost penalise you. They give you a big renewal premium hike, and then you look around, you can get it a lot cheaper somewhere else, and you haggle it down. I've just been through that with my home insurance. And I thought that the CMA was meant to have stopped that. But we're still in the situation where if you get a kind of loyalty penalty by staying with the insurance. So my advice is always look around. Yeah. It requires a bit of effort, but shop around and use the market.
Well, that's why God invented Martin Lewis, of course, isn't it? So
Absolutely.
You can have a little look around. But I mean, I discovered, interestingly, on that very point, David, recently, that because I've done that for a number of years, and you'd be with, and I'd never thought this would happen. I think I've changed insurance companies almost every year for about 6 years now. That would never have been the case. You'd have just stuck with, who you were with, the AA or Halifax or whoever it happened to be. But what I did notice on the last time my insurance was being renewed was that when I went to the price comparison sites, the differentials had kind of not completely disappeared, but they narrowed quite a bit. I couldn't quite find that. We've all seen it when your insurance company is asking for £1,000 a year. You discover one down here that's £400, and you think, how could there be such a difference? So you clearly go for that one. That seems to be less and less, and I don't know whether there's something in the world of business where companies are simply working on the very crude basis that as consumers we expect everything to go up at the moment, so they're joining in with the party and going, well, we might as well put it up because it won't be any surprise.
It could be. I think it is more heavily regulated, so this kind of ability of firms to whack up the premium and capture you is being limited. But I mean, I've just been through a situation where my insurer increased my premium by I think 130, and I had to ring up and say, hang on a minute, this is taking the mickey. Yep. Can you get it down in line with the competition? And they brought it down by about 50 quid. So it's always worth ringing and threatening to go. I think on some of the other points that Norman raised, he was extremely thoughtful. It was great hearing from a former minister. Of course, one of the things that is happening is as we're going electric cars are more expensive. The upfront price of them are more expensive. So that's another feeling that actually things are getting more expensive. It still makes sense if it's going through a company because you get a big tax break, or if you can charge at home. But if you can't charge at home, it becomes very expensive, and there isn't a cost saving for you. So my point all along is if we want people to save the planet and go electric, we've got to start giving them some better incentives.
100%. Big issues around that, and we could talk on that point alone. Listen, David, we hit the clock, but thank you as ever. David Bailey, Professor of Business Economics at Birmingham Business School. Thank you to him and to Norman Baker. Over to you on this one. 0344 499 1000. Is there a war on motorists? How are you feeling it in that respect? The cost of it all, the cost of fuel. Fuel is interesting, isn't it? It's all very well saying that they've frozen the tax over the years, but the actual cost of what we pay here is astronomical. I mean, 130, 135 a litre we're on at the moment. It nearly hit 140 again a couple of weeks back. It's in that ballpark all the time. You want to see it at about 80p. I don't think we're ever going to see that again, are we? 0344 499 1000.
Just before MPs went off for their Easter break in a way which was probably ill-advised, and I think the presentation and the way that it was handled has been really poor. So I think certainly they're guilty of sort of poor presentation and communication around this. But I don't think they've done a U-turn, and I think in fact what they are doing in terms of grooming gangs and the wider issue of child sexual abuse, which is much wider than just grooming gangs, is a considerable amount. They've done a huge amount of work already.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This from Gary, who says the Labour Party had its riots in the trade union movement, so I have a suggestion for all those white van man tradesmen up and down the country who are being crucified by the government's war on motorists. Form yourselves into a trade union and take industrial action. Refuse to do any work on government or council buildings or the homes of government ministers, Labour mayors or Labour councillors until they scrap congestion charging, ULEZ zones and all those other measures being used to punish people who are just trying to make a living. See how long these people can hold out when they have a leaky roof or their boiler isn't working and they can't get anybody to fix it. Sorry, mate, turns out you're a Labour councillor. Scab. And away you go. You're on strike. I love it. Brad says, spare a thought for those of us with higher road tax. One of mine is a 3-litre diesel Mercedes. £745 a year. I did allude to this at the beginning. The other car is £710 a year, says Brad. And similarly, Pete the Mole says electric cars should pay more because of their weight on road services. I've got an old Land Rover and my road tax is £735 a year, which is disgusting as my car is worthless, but they still want 735 quid a year. That is what we're dealing with. This is Mark in Bristol on Motorist. How you doing, Mark?
Hi, Ian. Good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon. What are your thoughts?
Well, I'm a courier in Bristol. I run a small van, just myself, and a motorbike. Obviously not at the same time. Depends on what the job is. But my insurance is, bear in mind I'm even older than you are, I've got full no claims insurance. For the bike and the van, I pay £3,890 a year.
Why?
Because I have what's known as hire or reward insurance.
Okay.
Because I'm a courier, because I'm delivering items.
Yes.
I'm effectively making money out of my insurance. Yeah, you see what I mean? So I'm the same insurance as a taxi driver.
Right. So because your car is not just social pleasure and domestic.
It's not. Well, yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Whatever they used to call it, because it's business related. Therefore, you get penalised for that.
Well, yes.
You might even say, I mean, you could, in another world, I reckon, Mark, you could say, well, hang on, you're a professional driver, you know more about driving and are more experienced and have more hours, not like a pilot would notch up their hours, they become more experienced. You'd think that would make you a safer bet, therefore cheaper insurance.
Yeah, but the flip side of that is I do an enormous amount of miles per year, both on the motorbike and in the van. But there are other things I have to take into account. Because I'm a business, I also have to have liability insurance.
Yep.
I also have to have goods in transit insurance. Now, if you look at the Uber drive, well, not the Uber as in the taxis, but the fast food mopeds.
Yep.
The vast majority, I'm not saying all, but a large percentage of them only operate on social, domestic and pleasure insurance.
I'm sure. 100%, right? Yeah.
Because ANPR only picks up whether or not that moped or scooter is insured.
It doesn't pick up what kind of insurance you've got.
Correct. And they do not also carry goods in transit insurance, and they don't take out liability insurance as well. So you've got an enormous amount of these going around. I mean, lots of them have just come over on boats, and they haven't even got licenses.
Indeed. I mean, that's a whole other racket, isn't it? I mean, there's the racket we were talking about earlier in the office about the kind of barbers shops and vapes and vape shops and God knows what else is going on behind those doors. But there's also that too, in terms of an industrial scale problem. People driving in that way.
Yeah, but then you also got, for instance, in Bristol, you've got LTNs going up all over the place.
They love an LTN.
Oh, they don't call them low traffic. They call livable traffic neighbourhoods.
Is that right? Okay.
Yeah. They changed the name. You know, it's a bit like you haven't got illegals coming across the water now. They're just irregular.
That's right. Yes, it's a softer way of describing a very difficult situation. Listen, I've got to move, Mark. You've been brilliant. Thank you for that. Let me talk to Andrew in Halifax. What are your thoughts on this, Andrew? Hi.
Hello, Ian. Well, I've mentioned this with you before. I mentioned to you that I was in Cyprus a few weeks ago, and I drove nearly 1,200 kilometres around Cyprus, and the roads were lovely. And I came across 2 sets of roadworks in the whole week that I was driving. Now, today, I think one of the things we are good at in this country, and we're not good at much, is digging holes in roads. We're absolutely brilliant at that.
Filling them up, not so good.
No. And what a lot of people don't realise, and this is why I think that the amount of roadworks on our roads is also part of the war on motorists, because a lot of people don't realise that when a utility company applies to dig up a road, the so-called safety zone around those works is not determined by the company, it's determined by the Health and Safety Executive, a government body. Yeah. Now, how many times have you seen roadworks on, say, Acacia Road, and you think, well, why the hell have they cordoned off 3 streets with a 25-way traffic control? when it's totally unnecessary. I mean, I'm heading from Halifax to Blackpool on the A646. I've just got to the outskirts of Burnley now. It's taken me an hour and 25 minutes, and I've come across 8 sets of roadworks on a 20-mile stretch of road.
Wow.
It is getting absolutely intolerable driving in this country.
And even in my local area, you know, the other day, you know, when you know your neck of the woods and you go, well, I can go this way, I'll try the other route, and you go the other route and the same thing, and I'll try another route. And there's exactly that, the 25-way traffic light scenario. They seem to love that. Listen, Andrew, you make a great point. I'm only moving because the news is upon us, but is that part of the war on motorists as well that Andrew has brilliantly identified there? The amount of flipping roadworks just to get from A to B. Drive you absolutely tonto. Our lines are open on that. Is there a war on motorists? Your own experience of expenditure, what it costs just to run your van or your truck or your car, particularly if you use it for business. We'll have more on that, plus the other big stories. Comment from you on the way. First, though, the time, 2 o'clock. Let's get the latest news headlines.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Yep, 3 minutes after 2 o'clock. Welcome back to the home of common sense. Loads going on the programme, including this. There's no such thing as a war on motorists, according to Labour and the Transport Secretary, Heidi Alexander. She's insisting she is tackling real problems, not invented ones. If you look at the miserable list of where taxation has really hit four wheels, car taxes, 20-mile-an-hour zones, expanded low-traffic neighbourhoods, the cost of petrol, the cost of road tax, the cost of insurance, the cost of a parking ticket, the list goes on. Details coming up. Is there a question here that you can answer? The war on motorists, your own experience, what is it doing to your pocket? Also this afternoon, Prime Minister Keir Starmer says the government will fund more than 5 local grooming gang inquiries, after all, if needed, and denies watering down either earlier plans. Well, that's not quite true. And what does he mean by the phrase if needed? I mean, it's desperately needed. There is a huge problem here. No one's really addressing it. Why is it taking almost people power to keep this one alive, to keep the flame of publicity burning on this crucial industrial scale crime that has happened over many years and the smart money says is still going on? And Rachel from Accounts is under fire again after the Chancellor accepted another lavish freebie, this time free theatre tickets and dinner worth 265 nigger. Thank you very much, Gov. Ka-ching. Nice work if you can get it. 0344 499 1000. I got, talking of parking tickets, I got a parking ticket yesterday when I got home from work. It was there waiting for me, courtesy of the CCTV at Stansted Airport. So we're going on holiday, we drive to Stansted, we pay for parking at the airport. And I'm not that familiar with Stansted, been there maybe half a dozen times. I don't think I've ever driven and parked there. And of course, like all of those you know, when you use different companies to park at an airport, when you turn up at the airport, it's a bit of a minefield because you think, which part? There's a few car parks here. There's one over there. There's one to my left, one to the right, one straight ahead. Which one am I meant to be parking in? I know what I'll do. I'll ask somebody. So as we drive almost just outside the airport, some of you will be ahead of me here, there's a drop-off zone. Many airports do this now, where if you're dropping somebody off or picking somebody up, you pay a £5 in order to utilise that moment of 10 minutes or something. So there's a fella standing there in a high-vis by the drop-off zone, and we pull over and ask the bloke. He says, I'm not sure, but somebody in that cabin over there, just on the other side of the road, they will probably be able to help you. Said, thank you very much, high-vis man. He went away with a nice wave saying, have a nice holiday. I legged it to the little cabin. I said to the lady there, look, this is the car park zone, where is it? She said, oh, no problem, just go to the roundabout, the end of the road, 5th exit, brings you back on yourself, but one level down, that's where your car park is. Thank you very much. She said, have a nice holiday as well. What lovely people over there at Stansted HQ. Little did I know that the stopping for about 45 seconds to ask directions was enough to put me in the drop-off zone. It says I'd used the drop-off zone, pick-up/drop-off zone, which would normally be a £5. So they want £100 off me, reduced to £25, which I was slightly surprised about, because ordinarily it would be 50 quid, right? But anyway, 25 quid. And of course you can challenge it. And I think, well, hang on, have I used the drop-off zone or have I not used the drop-off? I don't think of you. The spirit of the drop-off zone is you are dropping somebody off, right? To go off on their holidays. Like you're taking your teenage kid on their first trip. I'll drop you off here. You pay a £5, you do it online, job. I get that. What if you were in the drop-off zone but didn't strictly utilise the drop-off zone? They want 25 nicker out of me. Do I pay? Do I challenge? Any suggestions? 87222. I'm all ears at this end. One in here from Jason in Bristol, who says, Trump can help us out here. Say 0 tariffs if you stop the boats. I bet the boats will stop tomorrow. That's a very good point. James says, war on motorists. Don't you mean I love paying £750 a year because my car is 18 years old, despite the fact that newer, more polluting vehicles now pay less? It's a good point, because they've done that. Thank you, James. They've done that thing of, well, you've got a bigger car, it's a big car, so therefore you must pay more. This kind of stuff is nonsense. Let's get a word on this and the other stories of the day. Robert Taylor is back with us, the journalist and commentator. Afternoon to you, Robert.
Good afternoon, Ian.
Well, here's some breaking news. There is no war on motorists, apparently, Robert. So all of those hikes you've seen in insurance, taxation, petrol, goodness knows what else, ULEZ zones, congestion zones, the digital police snapping your number plate if you dare to do 31 miles an hour. All of that is a figment of your imagination, Robert.
Yeah, it doesn't wash, does it, Ian? And even if we say, well, the word war might be a bit exaggerated, well, I can tell you what, they're sucking us for every penny of tax that they can get out of us. I think it's something like £1.7 billion raised on various motoring taxes in the last budget.
Yep.
And of course, it's to pay for an ever-expanding state. It's not just motorists, but motorists seem to be fair game because we're the polluting baddies, apparently. So even if it's not a war, it comes pretty close to it in my book.
Yeah, and I thought it was rather interesting that Heidi Alexander gave this speech in York last night, and she invoked the words of the former socialist mayor of Bogota,
I think.
Bogota, that's it. Yeah, somebody did pick me up on that earlier. Bogota, the capital of Colombia, anyway. Enrique Peñalosa and socialist Peñalosa once said, an advanced city is not one where the poor have to own a car, but one where the rich choose to use public transport. And Heidi Alexander said, that is the vision I believe in. And I mean, it's a very romanticised way of putting it. Ultimately, it's anti-intellectual cobblers, but what she's attempting to say is it should be fair for all and everyone should be able to afford X, Y, Z. I mean, look, it's the 21st century. These things should be a choice, right? We shouldn't be penalised for having the audacity to want to drive on four wheels. One of the greatest innovators, the greatest symbol of social mobility in the human journey, and yet here we are. You might as well be driving around on a rabid pig or something, as far as the government are concerned.
Well, it's all very well asking us all to use public transport, but what happens when the railway workers are on strike so often as they were last year, and when the government has to buy them off by huge pay increases? I don't know what train drivers are paid now. On average, something like £70,000 a year, where nurses get about half of that. So it's all very well saying we should all use public transport, however rich you are, but the trains have to be working. You can't have them with strikes the whole time. Then, of course, we need our private cars. It's the very biggest incentive to get a private car is because the train drivers are off on strike.
Yeah, and it's also still, despite the heady costs of driving, Robert, it's cheaper to drive your car from north to south than it is to get a train.
Very true. Of course, railway passengers are also paying through the nose. We're paying through the nose for everything, aren't we, really? And the other thing is the government needs the revenue from car drivers. I think it's £30 billion a year that we pay in fuel duties. So motorists pay around £30 billion in fuel duties every year. It was the figure I last saw. Well, where is the government going to get that figure unless it's got us driving our cars?
100%. And this is the curious, strange crossroads. Sorry to bring a road analogy in there, but yeah, that's where we're at. Let's move to this story. This one's just broken as well. Parliament to be recalled tomorrow to discuss British Steel. It's good that they've been recalled for this. It's absolute crucial part of our economic infrastructure. The House of Commons is going to recall tomorrow at 11 a.m. to discuss the future. MPs are returning from Easter break to address concerns over the possible closure of the Scunthorpe plant, home to the UK's last blast furnaces. So unusual. It's going to be a Saturday sitting during an Easter break in the House of Commons, and rightly so, Robert.
Yeah, there aren't that many of those, are there? I remember a Saturday sitting, I think it was a Saturday, literally 40-odd years ago for the Falklands War, and it was regarded as truly exceptional to have a Saturday sitting. We had it then. And this shows how seriously this is being taken by all concerned, that the steel industry in this UK is in such dire straits that we need to bring Parliament back. That's a very serious step to take. And it'll be interesting to see what the politicians have to say about that tomorrow.
Yeah, Chancellor Rachel Reeves said all options remain on the table to save the plant. Only 34 times since 1948 has Parliament been recalled in this way. I don't know whether it's been on a Saturday in all of those occasions, but nonetheless, it is unusual, which does give you a sense, and I think gives everybody a sense of how important this is as well. The other political story that's just broken is that Michael Gove is to get a seat in the House of Lords. after Rishi Sunak issued his resignation honours list. It was kind of a little bit, a lot of people thought he will just get knighted, but a seat in the House of Lords, I can imagine Michael Gove quite enjoying that.
Yeah, well, I mean, Michael Gove will have his fans, he'll have his critics. I think he's done a lot that's really good, particularly in the field of education. I disagreed with him entirely over lockdown. I like his editorship of The Spectator. Generally speaking, I like what he does. So I would say good on him. Well done. Congratulations.
Yeah, well, we'll watch with interest what areas he finds to focus on. That tends to be the case, doesn't it, when you get a job in the House of Lords? Like any politician, you know, you have your pet projects that you want to bring to the forefront. So we will see. And fresh embarrassment for Rachel Reeves. She's forced to admit accepting another lavish freebie. I don't know what it is about Rachel Reeves and theatres. I mean, she should have been an actor, frankly, because she spends so much time either at the O2 or the National Theatre, wherever it happens to be. Nothing wrong with, you know, a politician going to the theatre once in a while. Naturally, you know, some complimentary tickets will come your way. I don't even worry too much about that. It just appears to be the sheer amount of time she goes. This is the latest, £265 for a play at the National Theatre. She previously accepted £600 gig tickets and £276 theatre tickets, defended her decision on security grounds, but later pledged to avoid freebies. And she's clearly not done that very well, because no sooner had everybody forgotten about the story and she's back there at the Olivier Theatre watching the next latest production.
Yeah, and I don't know what Rachel Reeves is playing at with all this. She's not a badly off a woman. I understand she is married to someone who also earns very well. I think he's in the civil service. Do they really need to be taking freebies of this sort? And there are only two stories that have really cut through in the last sort of 6-7 months since Labour came to power. Number one, the winter fuel allowance, that cut through. And number two, the freebies. Both of those have really undermined people's faith in the integrity of the incoming Labour government. And still, it seems, Rachel Reeves is taking freebies. It's extraordinary. I don't know why she does it.
Yeah. Would it be the last time, I wonder? Will she get collared again, I don't know, going to the pantomime at Cleethorpes with a couple of freebie tickets come the festive season? All eyes are on Rachel and her theatre-based proclivities, we know that much. And finally, this one, Kemi Badenoch, the Tories could work with reform on councils. This is an interesting move by Kemi Badenoch. She says local Tories could work with reform in councils, but ruled out a national electoral pact. This is more the sort of the idea that you would assist the other party, whether it's Tories, Reform, whoever it happens to be, rather than out and out merge with them.
Yeah, well, so she's saying now, and Farage is saying now, no deals. You know, we want to destroy the other one. We're going to form a government by ourselves. I'm not so sure. I think come the election in 2029, if it still looks as though Tories and Reform are both still on about 25, Labour's on maybe a bit more, and the only way to stop Starmer getting a second term is for the Tories and Reform to form some kind of alliance, whether it's formal or loose, whether it be a sort of tactical voting alliance.
Yeah.
They've got to go for it. So I take all this in with a little bit of a pinch of salt.
100%.
Easy to say now, but in 2029, it's going to be a very different story.
Yeah. Do you know, as you were saying that, for some reason, I had a flash of an image of Starmer outside Downing Street saying, it's been a privilege to be Prime Minister. We leave the country in better shape than we found it, and all that other sort of platitudinous nonsense that gets wheeled out by an exiting PM. But who goes in his place is, of course, the big story. But I think you're absolutely bang on that there's going to be some kind of deal come 2029. Robert, it's a lovely day out there. Enjoy the rest of it. Have a cracking weekend. Robert Taylor, the journalist and political commentator, with us on the programme. Thank you to him. Nick in Who says, I mentioned Stansted Airport. He says, Stansted Airport, I cannot recommend Stansted Airport Valet Park enough. Super efficient, not rip-off charges, fully signposted. No, I don't work for them or have any connection with them, just a customer. But the £5 drop-off charge is a money-grabbing rip-off. Yeah, I absolutely agree with you. The cost of the parking, I can't remember what it was for the week, was so reasonable. If you'd have parked down the road in an ordinary public car park, it would have cost you over twice the amount to be there all day, every day for 7 days. So totally agree with that. But the idea that you get a parking ticket for the drop-off charge when you didn't drop off, you just stopped in that zone to ask directions, which is literally what we did. I don't know what the deal is with that. Cliff in Berkshire referenced driving and the cost or the war on motorists. I held a driving licence for about 45 years until I had to give it up on medical grounds. I noticed that what I paid for, my first insurance, was pretty much what I paid every year, as my no-claims discount increased and inflation kicked in. My grandson had to pay almost $3,000 for his car at 18 years old. I wonder if it'll be his annual premium price until he gives up driving later in life. It's a very good point, that. There was that sense, as I was saying earlier, that insurance would go up, but it would maybe just go up a bit. You didn't, if somebody asked you how much your insurance was, you go, it's 150 quid. And they could ask you that in 3 years' time. You go, yeah, it's about 150. Never, wasn't such a conversation around it. So something has changed. My money, also from an insurance, not one to defend insurance companies, because they make a lot of money and have really weird criteria about stuff. But I reckon there's more and more people not paying, not even getting insurance. My guess would be that that is way on the increase compared to where it's ever been before. So there's a penalty on that, and if more of those drivers, inexperienced drivers, are having smashes, there's issues around that as well. So it could be that, or it could just be that they're just joining in with the, the cost of living crisis has had a really weird effect on some companies who've hiked up prices for no other reason than people expect things to be more expensive. So they've just done it. It hasn't cost them more, nothing's changed. But, well, if everyone else is putting their prices up, we might as well do it as well. I think there's a bit of that going on too. 0344 499 1000. Is there a war on motorists? Trump's tariffs is still bubbling away in the pipeline there. Do you work for British Steel? Do you work for the Steel Corporation, the factory in Scunthorpe? Is that your job? Tell us more about how you feel. Parliament is recalled tomorrow to discuss British Steel future. Details on that as well. Everything you need to know and all the breaking news right here on Talk. It's 20 past 2.
There is quite a lot of bluish Labour MPs. There's a group of them called Blue Labour, who talk a lot of sense, I think, on a lot of issues. I'm afraid this isn't one of them. I think I agree with Yvette Cooper, the Home Secretary. The important thing is to have the police investigations resourced properly, so that these people are put behind bars. I don't think there's much advantage to be gained by spending vast amounts of public money.
Just before MPs went off for their Easter break in a way which was probably ill-advised.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is Talk. This one comes in from Nick, who says, my son, who's 19, pays over £300 a month for his insurance. It's an absolute joke. £3,600, well, so nearer £4,000 a year. To insure a car, and without knowing, I'd imagine, Nick, that your lad isn't driving, some souped-up Merc or a, sporty BMW. It's insane. And Mike just very obviously says, Ian, if UK Labour say there isn't a war on motorists, you can bet your life there is a war on motorists. Yeah, I'd buy that any day of the week. Natasha says, since this government appears to lie rather a lot and do the opposite to what they say, saying there is not a war on motorists means there definitely is, and we all know it. Yeah. Mark in Norwich, I don't think your mate had insurance for his XR3i because back then I wanted one, but I couldn't get one because I was under 21, so nobody would insure me. Yeah, he wasn't a mate, he was a fella around. I'd be surprised if he didn't have insurance because he came from that kind of family that it would have been extraordinary if he didn't. But I do remember there being a conversation about what it would have. I don't know if we were ever told what it cost, but it was astronomical. But yeah, there were companies that wouldn't insure young drivers because they didn't, the kind of car they'd got was too much. And sometimes there is a bit of logic in that. I'm always, bamboozled, I think everybody else is, when you see that a millionaire has bought their kid, some incredibly nippy sports model for their 17th birthday, and then they wrap it around a lamppost along with their friends, and they're never heard of again for obvious reasons. You see those kind of, you'd have to be nuts to do that to a new driver. We mentioned, by the way, that Michael Gove is going into the House of Lords. There's been a couple of other, these are on Rishi Sunak's kind of resignation honours list. Former Chancellor Jeremy Hunt becomes a Sir Hunt, careful, and former Foreign Secretary James Cleverly is also being knighted as well. So Jeremy Hunt and James Cleverly, a pair of knights, if there ever was two, being given gongs. Andrew's in Hertfordshire on motorists. What have you got for us, Andrew? Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. In relation to the insurance, remember that they're pricing risk, and if you look at the horrific accidents involving young people,
yes,
equally you would do that. And once you go past 70 miles an hour, if you've hospitalised someone or put them on a machine, each mile an hour you are over the limit is equated into £250,000, £300,000. So it is a pure maths business play as to how they do the calculations on the car.
Wow. So that's there's obviously an algorithm and a computer that sort of works this out.
Yeah, and if you look, tragically, there was a wonderful young lad who played for Manchester United who bought a car. He was a great friend of Beckham's, and he died so very early on. And Manchester United now, no young player can have a performance car like that. Yeah. They mandated it. So, in relation to cars, I pay roughly about £600 a month to keep it on the road. Remember, insurance is taxed. Insurance is taxed as a tax, so it's a specific insurance tax. So you're taxed on your money, and people don't realise that. If you look at the Labour Party, Beeching shut down the railways. That forced freight onto the road. Then it forced people in rural communities to have a car. And if you have a car, you have a national insurance number, and that's the registration number of the car. They know where you live. They milk it. Now, if you really want to show there's no war on motorists, cut the duty on fuel by 3/4, and that would put more money in people's pocket. And just so you know how bigoted they are, the Mayor of London, what a wonderful individual he is, TfL people, 60,000 of them and their families get free transport on the trains and the tube. Think about that.
How many did you say?
It comes to 60,000 people. It's the people and their dependents, and not even just the people.
Yeah, I remember that. I mean, I think it was back in the day, it was even more generous than it is now, but it's still not bad, is it?
No, but remember, the people in rural communities, they have to have a car. And it's the only way young people can get around. And it is taxed because it's a revenue stream. And what that thing that's now in charge of transport said, that just goes to show that when you're run by communists, the individual doesn't matter, the state does.
Yeah. Profound point to finish on, Andrew. Great call. Thank you for that. The state always matters. Nothing is greater than the state. And they have it the wrong way round. They genuinely believe with every fibre of their being that that's the right way to do. The state knows best. And that's really just saying we know best as individuals. Us collection of left-wing MPs know better about how to run life than everybody else. I mean, but by dint of becoming an MP, all of them of whatever hue or suede have got a little bit of that in them. But I think when it comes to sort of the socialism, it's more than just it's not a PS to your ideology. It informs your entire being. Every fibre of you has this, sort of belief system, which is an illness, by the way. And they believe it so much that actually implementing it doesn't come with a sense of guilt or sorrow or, it's going to be more expensive. They believe it. That's how they function. That's what gets them out of bed in the morning, believing they're fighting a perpetual battle. Andy in Manchester says, great show. I'm a chauffeur, and when I started years ago, I had to pick up from the Hilton at Heathrow Airport. I was unfamiliar with the layout and was looking for the inlet road to the hotel. I mistakenly drive through the drop-off lane, not even stopping. I didn't realise I'd done this at the time. A few weeks later, I was sent a hefty bill, didn't even fight it, just paid it. But it annoyed me so much. And that's how they get you with this Stansted thing I've got. It's like, it's 25 quid. If I appeal it, and I'm pretty sure you wouldn't need the top lawyer in the land to go, well, yeah, you didn't drop off, so therefore you can't, you didn't utilise the lane for that purpose. But if you appeal it and you lose, then you have to pay the full 100 quid. And that's, of course, you're in that pincer movement. And then you've got the hassle, the to and fro. There's no phone, you can't talk to somebody. You would never be able to ring up a number and there'll be Beryl at the other end or go, hello, love, how's it go? Oh, did you? I didn't really, oh, I see, yeah, we've looked at the footage. Clearly you didn't drop off, so don't worry about it, we've cancelled it. That wouldn't happen. No, you'd go through this protracted nonsense and an email exchange and filling out a form and waiting for an answer, and then it would come back and then they go, no, we've decided you did utilise the lane because your purpose of being there is irrelevant, the fact you were there. So now it's 100 quid, you surrender your right to the discount of 25 quid, which in itself I'm sure must be illegal somewhere. But so that's much like Andy there. You just think, do I just pay the 25 quid, save all that jip and hassle? And Paul in Wiltshire says, I do airport drop-offs for a living and it's not 5 quid anymore, it's £6, a 20% increase in a year. That's Heathrow and Gatwick, £7 in Bristol. They're all doing it, a total rip-off. It's kind of bizarre, isn't it? Because no one's using that lane. It's not like you're parking up and going shopping for the day. You're dropping off at an airport. But yeah, how many cars do it? Hundreds, thousands a day, probably. It's good money to be made in the drop-off game. 0344 499 1000, 2:30. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This comes from Alex in Essex, who says, it's rubbish, not garbage. There's too many Americanisms in our language. Please don't encourage it. I'll tell you why I use the word garbage, because I just used the word rubbish, and I was doing that presenter thing where you search for an alternative word. You need a synonym or an alternative to dress. It's called dressing the sentence, giving some colour to the riff, the arc of your narrative, as it were. And for no other reason, because on any other day of the week, Al, I 100% agree with you. I've never used, because if you put the garbage out, kids use it though. Kids, and you know, you take the online world. What was it my little boy said? My 6-year-old said something that was, the shopping cart. He said, can I get in the cart? This was yesterday, Tesco. Can I get in the cart? Can I get in the cart? No, you can't. So I left him out there on his own. Dare you speak in American tongue? Yeah, that all comes from, that's a kind of YouTube Kids kind of phenomenon thing. The cart. And this story, 25 to 3, by the way. Keir Starmer says the government will fund more than 5 local grooming gangs inquiries if needed. He denies watering down earlier plans. Well, they were demonstrably watered down because, you know, what we heard initially was something like, reluctantly, I sensed, from the Home Secretary, 5 local inquiries. And then when the Minister, Jess Phillips, was asked about this, she used very different wording and was unequivocal in her inability to say we'll have 5. She talked about a flexible approach, etc. Critics, including some top Labour voices, say the approach is weak and local councils can't be trusted to handle such serious abuse cases. Blue Labour is demanding a full national inquiry with powers of arrest, calling grooming gangs a national evil needing a proper response. Let's speak to Harvey Proctor, the former Conservative MP who found himself at the centre of unfounded, malicious, invented allegations. So has I'm assuming, Harvey, because of your own experience of this, you know how you can't always trust the system, let's put it like that.
No, that is true. And sometimes, as I did, you have to fight the system.
Yeah.
However, what is quite clear is that the present Labour government is not wishing to have a national statutory inquiry into grooming of young girls, particularly young girls, by Pakistani ethnic heritage people for political reasons. And because they rejected the national inquiry, they said, oh, let's inquire into these local authorities, predominantly Labour local authorities, by getting the Labour local authorities to conduct their own inquiries, amongst other things, into themselves.
Yeah.
Now they're going weak even on that. This announcement was made in January. There was to be 5. I think they've only named one local authority, Oldham, as to where there might be an inquiry, but nothing has started. So for those victims, genuine victims, and their families and friends, this is quite wrong and outrageous. So I think now, given that they've delayed so long, it's quite clear they don't want genuine inquiries into what went wrong. They should be pressed to have a full statutory national inquiry with legal powers, including powers of arrest.
100%. And you wouldn't have to be a journalist or a lawyer or a politician to be able to see the almost casual way with which Labour are dealing with this, bearing in mind the subject matter, which is industrial scale sexual abuse and rape and even the deaths of some young girls consistently over many years. And you mentioned the background of the perpetrators in this case. You would imagine in any other world, Harvey, you would have politicians jumping over themselves to say, we've got to get to the heart of this. We've really got to root out what's happened here. We need to establish this. They would be very firm. They would be absolutely thorough. They would be no nonsense and robust about this. But we are seeing the very opposite. And curiously, the Home Office Minister happens to be also the Minister in charge of safeguarding women and girls, which is a sort of side point that you really couldn't make up, which just, if you like, puts some really unsavoury icing on this casual cake of ineptitude.
And why, correct, and why are they doing this? Because it's for party political reasons that they believe in certain constituencies and in certain council areas, and we've got local elections coming up, they fear losing the Pakistani vote. That's what it's all about. Now, we should really demand that there's a national inquiry. Coincidentally, I've just learned that the House of Commons is sitting tomorrow to discuss Scunthorpe and the steel industry. I would recommend to all political parties, certainly the Conservative leadership, that they this afternoon put down questions to the Home Secretary and to the Safeguarding Minister on this matter to be raised tomorrow as a matter of emergency.
100%.
Of course, the steel industry is very important, but this issue is very important too.
And it is that lack of recognition, really. I mean, I even when I hear the Prime Minister or Yvette Cooper talk about this, they sort of use this kind of curious word salad is spewed from the lips of the front bench as they talk about, yeah, we're going to do something and we'll get to the bottom of it and it's terrible what happened. There's no sense, Harvey, that this is really in their DNA to care enough about this. And you've outlined, and I think correctly, why that might be. But it's bearing in mind the subject matter and what we are talking about here, it is particularly unpalatable and unsavoury to hear such a cavalier approach to an issue that is so sensitive and so important.
You know how important it is, and I've met many genuine victims of these matters. So I sympathise with the families and friends of these genuine victims wanting a conclusion. That's not what they're getting. They're getting drip and they're getting political speak.
Yeah.
What's the latest one? Oh, well, the money that was allocated for these inquiries of local authorities or in local authorities may now be used for other purposes other than the inquiry. Yeah. I bet it is, because they don't want the inquiry. They don't want to find out and admit why it happened. And families and friends and victims do want this to come out, and all sane, thinking people also want it to come out.
100%.
So I will press the Conservative front bench to use tomorrow's opportunity to put down an emergency question and press the Speaker to allow the Home Secretary and the Safeguarding Minister to be called to account in the House of Commons at the earliest opportunity, which is now tomorrow.
And that sounds absolutely correct and the right thing to do. We will watch and see how that plays out. But meantime, Harvey Proctor, thank you, sir. It's always good to gauge your views on these things. And I think his own backstory, if you're not familiar with what happened to Harvey Proctor, then I wouldn't have time to go over the entirety of the story. But it's horrific being wrongly accused of horrendous sex crimes, as he was, named in Parliament and goodness knows what else. I mean, it was just awful. But I would guess that that also puts you in a place where your understanding of injustice is heightened somewhat. So when you see a story like this, and he's a former politician as well, I mean, his life was absolutely ripped apart completely by what happened. You know, the old Bill turning up, completely dismantling his home, and it was all through lies and allegations and accusations where there was literally no evidence. Someone just said it, they made it up, and the liar ended up getting about 16 years in jail for that and other things attached to that in a similar area as well. So I think Harvey's voice is important on that, because he knows what an injustice looks like, he knows what it feels like, and to see other people not being able to get the correct hearings and the correct people being held to account is deeply frustrating. And do you know what I was thinking? I feel so strongly about this that one of the reasons is that it's actually rather simple, because you have the left who, and we know that Yvette Cooper and even Keir Starmer, you know, when he talked about, you know, riots and people's views, they're sort of bunch of right-wingers and writing people off because they have a different view, or writing people off because they articulate their view in a different kind of way, or perhaps they can't necessarily articulate their view in a way that a seasoned politician might. They don't recognise the anger around that. So it's very easy for them to go, oh, this is just a right-wing conspiracy. There's been some horrendous... In fact, two Labour MPs who I spotted, and the names... I think I saved the details of this somewhere. Tessa Munt, who's a Lib Dem MP, was furious at Katie Lamb, the Conservative MP, who gave Jess Phillips a royal pasting the other day and graphically read out the experiences of some of these girls. And in response, Lib Dem MP Tessa Munt was furious that Kate Lamb brought up the most terrible examples of child abuse in UK history during a debate on child abuse. This mention of the grooming gangs apparently makes her blood boil. Just to hear a woman in particular, but any politician, kind of accusing the messenger of playing unbelievable. And what hit me this morning was, bearing in mind there's thousands of these cases, even if there were some people who were not complicit, that have been accused of being complicit, okay, whether it's a counsellor or a social worker, law enforcement, whoever it happens to be, you know, people who had this wall of silence around this horrific issue. Let's say some of them didn't do anything wrong. The one thing you can guarantee is that some of them did. And bearing in mind there's thousands of victims and thousands of anecdotal stories that have been told already to select committees and parliaments, and we heard Katie Lamb, the Conservative MP, a bit of a rising star of the Tories now, it seems. She's a new MP as of July last year. Seeing these stories come up, there's bound to be, I think you could reasonably say that there's going to be 100 people who are complicit in covering this up or ignoring the plight or the pleas of young girls. Let's say there's 100. In all likelihood, there's going to be many, many more. But 100 people that might be guilty of a cover-up of child abuse is a lot of people. And these are people with titles. These are people with jobs that are meant to do the very opposite to that. So I'm being generous here. Let's say it's just 100. That in itself would be enough for a massive inquiry, right? To get to the bottom of how people who are paid to do the very opposite. They're paid as, you know, safeguarding people, social workers, people who are counsellors, meant to look after people, those that have impressive titles, paid good money, etc. So let's just say there's 100. That's all you need to know. So, all right, let's buy the left-wing lie that it's not thousands. It's been exaggerated. OK, so it's been exaggerated. All right, let's give you the benefit of the doubt. It's not, but let's say it has. Just 100. Just 100? 100 officials? 100 officials? Not 100 dodgepots from scattered all over the place. People whose jobs it was to do the very opposite. That would be enough, surely, to fire the starting gun of a national inquiry. But that's the world we're living. So the likes of Tessa Munt, who should resign as a member of Parliament, her disgusting words just a couple of days ago highlighted her ineptitude, and she's just one of many that are happy to publicly stand up and say this guff without realising quite what they're saying, because they don't like what the Tories have had to say on this. 0344 499 1000. On a lighter note, we're going to go back to your calls on motoring in a couple of moments, and the voice of doom, day 10. Day 10! I kid you not. It's back after this.
What I would wonder is how you can argue that Hamas isn't a terrorist organisation if the definition is so broad.
Well, by that logic, Israel's a terrorist organisation. Do you agree?
No.
Well, think about it. Come on, man. Think it through. If you agree the definition is very, very broad, then the Secretary of State could say, right, clearly it applies to Israel.
But you said it about Hamas,
they're doing a genocide.
but you're arguing the counter
That's
to
quite
this.
Violent. I'm going to say that the IDF is a terrorist organisation. She could do that if she wanted. She literally could. But why shouldn't she? They're doing a genocide.
Why shouldn't she? It's not a genocide. It is factually not a genocide.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
10 to 3, this comes from Claire Walker, who says, war on motorists, absolutely. Insurance went up for me, 200 quid for 0 claims. Petrol, 131 a litre. It's 135 at my local Tesco. 20 mile an hour zones all over Doncaster. Temporary traffic lights when one goes down, the next one goes up. Then they finish, but don't take them down for a week. Yeah, they love that one, don't they? 2 major routes into town blocked at the same time quite often. And this week it's been decided that a lot of the major places where people will be taking their kids on their time off school, they are surface dressing. Left hand doesn't know what the right hand is doing. Yeah, because they do go, well, we'll do it in the school holidays. It makes sense. Well, not always. Right, Voice of Doom, day 10 on the Voice of Doom. This has gone on for 10 days. It's the mystery voice with a political angle to it. You've got one task, and that's to identify whose voice is this.
Political decisions were taken.
Whatever you do, do not phone in, because we haven't got any prizes at this end. You can, however, if you wish, take part on 87222. Message us there. Here's the voice again.
Political decisions were taken.
Will it go on day 10? We'll find out after the news at 3 if we have a winner. If not, it rolls over to Monday. It's getting up to the record of rollovers, which is 14 days. This is day 10. Who is this?
Political decisions were taken.
87222 if you think you know. Jules is in Bedford. How are you doing, Jules?
Hi, yes. So back to the happy subject or not of grooming gangs, rape gangs. Sorry about that. Yeah, so I find this really interesting because it's being said, oh, you know, Labour's fudging it because they're worried about losing the Pakistani vote. Well, that may or may not be true, but what was the Conservatives' excuse? Because they wouldn't have been worried about losing a vote they didn't really ever have.
That's a very good point. That's a really good point.
So why didn't they do it? And I think what's underlying this is the common factor is when they know what they will find if they look under the bonnet. Mm-hmm. They know that this is endemic and it's extremely widespread. It's become, in most urban centres where this demographic is present, a cultural norm. And that's what they're really frightened of exposing, because if they expose that, what's going to be the reaction of the rest of us?
And do they also...
It's not going to be pretty.
No, it won't be pretty. And will they also expose, you know, if you like, a complete collapse of what local government is? I mean, if we discover, you know, that there are big names in local authorities, ultimately, and others, that were responsible for covering this up, then the entire scaffolding of our system begins to collapse. And no government, red or blue, would be happy with that.
No, well, this is it. They know how bad this is, and they are desperate for us not to find out the true scale of it. Yeah. They don't want a national inquiry, because then you see all the dots on the page at once, and then you can join them up.
Indeed. Jules.
It's either that or the Conservatives and Labour are both making a racist and Islamophobic mistake.
It could, yes.
One or the other.
It may well be as simple as that they're literally on the same page as this, even though there are maybe slightly different reasons for it. Jules, powerful stuff, thank you. On the same point, Tarquin down in London. What are you making of this, Tarquin?
Yeah, I'd just like to support everything that my colleague Jules said there, and hats off, kudos to you, Ian, for raising this. It's a very sensitive subject. We're almost like sub judice, because this isn't by no means over.
Yes, it feels like they've got this into such a place. It feels like we're not meant to talk about it.
Yeah, and of course that never worked in history. That has never worked. The truth always got the bleach of Searchlight and the torch of it will come out. And for these career politicians to be trying to do this, they will, in the fullness of time, be in the dock. And I include Cameron, Osborne, Theresa May, Boris. They're all as guilty as the current incumbents because they've all tried to conceal this. And when there is a national inquiry, when we have legal powers, we the people, we will bring all these perpetrators to justice, and the truth will be known, and the truth will come out, and everyone will be able to see. There's nothing they can do to stop it. They're only doing it for career political purposes. There's nothing about justice. As we look at the blindfold of justice and the scales, you'd almost want to cry when you look at that now, don't you, Ian?
100%. And if you look at the amount of victims that we're talking about here, I can't think really of any other demographic that will be treated so appallingly.
Exactly.
And to hear politicians sort of not just ignoring it, but telling off other politicians who are raising it.
Indeed. Had we had 440 Katie Lambs before last July, and this wouldn't be the situation, would it?
100%. Tarquin, again, really powerful stuff. Let's see where this goes in the coming weeks, but this cannot be left alone. This should be raised on a daily basis at varying levels, and we'll certainly continue to do it here on afternoons here on Talk. Thank you to Tarquin. Thank you to Jules. More calls from you on the way. We're going to talk tech with Will Guyot, back with us in the next hour to highlight those big technology stories that aren't hitting the technology geeky pages anymore. This is front page stuff nowadays. More on that from Will. And have we finally, after 10 days of trying, got a winner on the Voice of Doom, radio's most addictive mystery voice bit? This is the voice we're asking you to identify.
Political decisions were taken.
And here it is one more time.
Political decisions were taken.
87222 if you think you know who it is. Remember, these voices are always either politicians or connected in some way to politics. If you think you know, 87222, maybe, just maybe, on day 10, we will get an answer. Before all of that, let's get the latest news headlines. The time, 3 o'clock.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good afternoon, 3 minutes after 3 o'clock. So there's no such thing as a war on motorists. I know this because Heidi Alexander, Labour's Transport Secretary, told us so. Really? She insists she's tackling real problems, not invented ones. Her words. This is despite, of course, God knows how many new car taxes, 20-mile-an-hour zones, expanded low-traffic neighbourhoods, the cost of fuel, the cost of parking, the cost of insurance. The miserable list goes on if you get around on four wheels. But apparently, no such thing as a war on motorists. More response from you on the way. Also this afternoon, brazen thieves have been filmed stripping Greggs shelves bare, with staff absolutely powerless to stop them as police are locked away in classrooms being taught that they have white privilege. Yes, two stories there. We'll look at both in a couple of moments. The Greggs thing, you see if you're watching this on our YouTube feed. It's so brazen, it's unbelievable. It's sort of taken shoplifting to a whole... No one's even looking around to see if someone's looking at them. They just go in and nick a sausage roll or whatever it is and leg it again. And will gadgets like phones, laptops, tablets and smartwatches soon become more expensive as President Trump's controversial trade policy slaps a 145% tariff on Chinese imports where many of them are made? I did hear a story that Apple were trying to get thousands or millions of units of phones out of India, I think it was, just to circumnavigate the tariff issue. Details to come. Everything you need to know, all the breaking news right here on Talk 0344 499 1000. So, have we got a winner on the Voice of Doom? Let me remind you of this mystery voice.
Political decisions were taken.
It's been running for 10 days. This is day 10. Some of the answers we've had today. Chris Patton, no. Sebastian Coe, no. It is not Norman Tebbit. Peter Hain, no. Sir Robert Peel. That would be great. No. Dominic Cummings, it is not. Oliver Letwin, it's a big fat no. Crispin Blunt, also nope. Chris Philp, however, no. Not him either. We still have not got an answer. It rolls over the weekend, back on Monday for day 11. Watch this space. The whole world is now talking. It's going to be mentioned at the United Nations, I'm sure. Now, brazen thieves have been filmed looting a Greggs store in broad daylight as staff stood by, ordered not to intervene. The footage has reignited fears of lawlessness on Britain's high streets, with no arrests reported. It comes as police forces face growing criticism for prioritising things like diversity training over frontline crime fighting. And what is happening in those Greggs stores is extraordinary. Let's speak to Harry Miller, former police officer and founder of Fair Cop. Harry, afternoon to you.
Yeah, afternoon, Ian. What another day? What another story?
Yeah,
we're getting sick of it, aren't we?
They just keep on coming now, don't they? On one hand, we've got the sort of DEI stuff that's dripping on an hourly basis into our in-trays, and then juxtapose that with stories such as, these people in Greggs, and we could have picked many other places as well, but Greggs in particular, where I said just a second ago, Harry, not sure if you picked it up, but you've got thieves now who are not even looking around. They're not going, oh, is anybody watching? I'll just nick 3 bottles of Coca-Cola and a sandwich. They're just walking in and taking it.
Yeah. Well, once upon a time, in order to be a successful thief, you had to employ a certain degree of guile. Now you don't need to do that at all. It's an easy choice. Career-wise, it's fairly risk-free.
Yeah.
Because store detectives aren't going to do anything about it. Most members of the public are rightly not going to do anything about it. And unfortunately, the police are too busy on their diversity training courses or checking their white privilege to do anything about it. So as far as I'm concerned, if you are a thief, if your bent is towards dishonesty, then right now it's a golden time, because the chances are you're going to get away with it scot-free. Now, the argument is that shoplifting is just a minor offence. Well, it's not if you own a shop.
No.
And it doesn't matter whether it's a Greggs or whether it's a corner shop or what it is. You've got to make money selling that stuff. And if you don't make money, you go bust. It's as simple as that. And certainly when it comes to a small shop, 100 quid's worth of stolen gear in a week represents a good percentage of your profit for the week, which means in effect you're working for free. So whilst the police might consider it to be low-level crime, if you are a shop owner, it is not low-level at all. It is devastating. And we need our police force to take this so-called low-level crime seriously and do something about it. What we need to do, Ian, is put fear back in the hearts and minds of would-be thieves. So they think twice. So they think, do you know what? Going into the shop and stealing from the shop is probably going to be a risky business, because the chances are a police officer is going to pull up with the twos and blues blaring, and I'm going to get nicked, and then I'm going to be taken in front of a magistrate who's not going to be a softie, but he's going to bind me over. He's going to send me to jail. He's going to fine me. He's going to confiscate my car. He's going to do whatever it takes to stop me on this career of lawlessness. But without the deterrent in the minds of these criminals, they can just go out there and do it. It's a simple, risk-free career choice, because we don't have a police force that is willing to tackle the job.
Yeah, and we have a compounding effect here, of course, Harry, don't we? That as this has gone on, as we've discussed more and more about no response to this level of criminality, it becomes almost a self-fulfilling prophecy, sadly, because, I mean, obviously we have to talk about this, but in doing so, others are now emboldened. It's no, you know, the way these people are walking into these Greggs shops, nicking stuff, is just so casual, so brazen, that it's no longer, again, no longer any fear of getting caught. And it looks, even on the odd occasion when there's a security guard that stops to have a word, they just shout back and walk out with the goods anyway. So there's no fear here at all.
That's absolutely right. You know, there is more chance of the police turning up if you've liked a Tommy Robinson post on Twitter, or if you've used a wrong pronoun in a school environment, than if you've been burgled, robbed, had your car stolen, had your phone stolen, or whatever, because these are all classed as socially as low-level crimes. The police are far more interested these days in social crimes, in crimes that confront the government's orthodoxy. So, you know, saying the wrong pronoun, liking the wrong tweet, being seen on the wrong march. These are the things that will prompt police attention, and that attention will be very swift.
Where do you sorry to interject, Harry, but where do you think if I talk to the average copper, and I was at an event just a week or so ago where there was 200 police officers in the room and chatting to lots of them, there's no one, you don't tend to meet a copper that thinks this stuff is okay. So it's clearly above the pay grade of the average Bobby on the beat. It's coming from somewhere. If you speak to a politician, they will tell you, well, not all of them, but some will go, yes, clearly, you know, this was a step too far and I'm investigating. Where's the point? If we were Columbo trying to investigate where the hell this came from, who would we be pointing the finger at?
The College of Policing. The College of Policing has got one job, really, and that's to make sure its officers know how to uphold the law. Now, in order to uphold the law, first of all, you've got to understand what the law is, and you've got to understand that people in this country are absolutely free to say, to think, to speak, to do as they will, right up until the point that they break a law. So if you have a police force that doesn't understand what the law is, you're going to have a rogue police force. Let's take the case this week that's come to light of the police officers who went and arrested a mother because she'd confiscated her child's iPad. I've never heard of anything so ludicrous and stupid and dangerous in my life. The definition of theft, it's so easy. It's the dishonest appropriation of the property of another with the intention of permanently depriving them of it. There isn't a cat in hell's chance that this was theft. A parent being a parent and simply confiscating an iPad, perhaps for a few hours, doesn't come close to the definition of theft. So what were these police officers thinking? What were these police officers doing? And I've seen it said that maybe they were just junior officers. To that, I say pooey. Absolutely not. If you don't understand what theft is, if you can't speak the definition of theft, if you don't know the definition of theft and the points to prove theft in your sleep, then go and be a bus driver, go and be a welder, Go and be a hairdresser, but for God's sake, don't be a police officer, because you are entirely disconnected from the law. And part of this is recruitment.
Yeah,
the police are far more interested in filling diversity quotas than they are in fulfilling posts with proper, hard-nosed, practical, common sense officers. In fact, it's even worse. A lot of these good officers, the kind of officer that you and I would recognise as the right sort, are being forced out with a vindictive accusations. There's this thing called bad appling, where if somebody just says something wrong or they express an orthodoxy that the chief constable doesn't like, you get bad appled, and then it's a long and horrible process where you either end up sacked or so demoralised that you leave. And this is being done on purpose, as far as I'm concerned, to get rid of common sense practical officers who know the law, in order to replace them with diversity targets.
Yeah, it does. I mean, we'll come to that diversity thing in just a second, but just to focus in for a moment, you mentioned the mother of two arrested for theft, held in a cell for 7.5 hours after confiscating her own kids' iPads. It's hard to... The story isn't written up brilliantly well, but it appears that it was, I don't know whether it was the dad or an ex-partner who said, my kids haven't got their iPads, the mum has stolen, or whatever it was. But as you rightly say, Harry, it would have taken half a second to turn up at this woman's house and establish really, really quickly that... I mean, if I walked into Curry's tomorrow and nicked an iPad, I don't think the police would come. Somehow, they've turned up at this woman's address, arrested her, clearly had a little search of the house, I would imagine, stuck her in jail for 7.5 hours and then gone, oh, sorry, nothing to see here. I mean, that's outrageous.
Absolutely. We've got far too much of this with the police saying sorry, and saying sorry is not good enough. You have no right as a police officer interfering with the freedoms of family life, interfering with the free speech, interfering with any individual unless they have clearly broken a law. Then you've got the power to do so. But they're using this power in a willy-nilly on a willy-nilly basis, and then think that simply saying sorry and issuing an apology is good enough. Well, it's not good enough. As far as I'm concerned, if I were to turn up at somebody's house and no crime had been committed, and then I grabbed them and detained them for 7 hours, I would be done, and rightly so, for kidnap.
Right.
Why did the police get a pass on this? This sort of behaviour would not be acceptable were you and I to be involved in it. Why is it acceptable behaviour when the police were involved in it? Well, I'm telling you now, Ian, it's not acceptable. There was not a shadow of a doubt about a crime having been committed here. No crime was committed. There was no need for an arrest. There was no need for a detention. What the custody sergeant who authorised the detention was thinking, I have absolutely no idea. But it's rotten from top to bottom. And you asked me who is to blame, and it's the College of Policing who is to blame. There's 65 million quid going to that organisation, and they're not getting police officers through with the most elementary, basic training. They are so keen to teach officers about their white privilege, how to spot unconscious bias. Well, all of that is utter nonsense. We're not interested. You and I aren't interested in that. What we want is a police force that is largely colourblind and which serves without fear and without favour, and do so from a position of competency, not suck it and see, get it wrong and then apologise. It's happening far too often, and I lay this squarely at the College of Policing's door.
And you mentioned some of the training that, you know, while the police aren't being told to go out and nab shoplifters, genuine criminals and the like, they're having some kind of DEI training. In the story that yesterday it was about, I think it was West Yorkshire, that were not recruiting as many white officers. And today, it's Thames Valley. Police officers at one of Britain's biggest police forces have been taught about white privilege. They've introduced equity training, which covers topics including white privilege and microaggressions. And, of course, this is the force that introduced the training for all officers last September, despite having been found by an employment tribunal a month earlier to have positively discriminated against white officers, Harry. I mean, you can't make this up. I mean, we could argue forever, what the hell is this white privilege thing? I think some of those grooming gang victims might want to have an argument on that one. But it just seems a nonsense. And in this particular case, they'd already been found guilty of discriminating against white officers.
Yeah, well, I'm telling you now, if you ask them, they would say that they are a learning organisation. Well, they're not. If you're found guilty of being discriminatory based on race, and then you continue to do it, you've not learned anything at all. The problem here is that the police have set themselves above the law. What they're trying to do is look 20, 50 years ahead and go, oh, I wonder what the law will be like then, and let's act like that now.
Yeah.
That's what they're doing. Well, we don't want a police force like that. Whether the law is good or whether the law is bad, that's down for other people to sort out. If you want to change the law, don't be a police officer. If you want to uphold the law blindly without fear or favour, then you can become a police officer. Now we have police officers who are activists, police officers who are willingly ignoring the law, who are setting themselves above the law, who see a higher authority than the law, maybe human rights, maybe something they've seen from one of the pressure groups. But law has become secondary to the police. And all fair cop want is a return to the rule of law. Once we get that, Ian, I'll be gone. I don't want to be doing this for another 7 years. Yeah. I'll be gone, and it would be so easy to put right. Train officers in the law, train officers in our rights as members of the public, and then, once they understand that, then set them to work policing our streets. Yeah. They're far more interested at the moment in chasing diversity quotas than they are in chasing criminals. And that itself is criminal as far as I'm concerned. A police force like that is not fit for purpose. And I'd just like to know whose responsibility it is. You ask the College of Policing and they say, oh, it's down to individual chief constables. You ask the individual chief constables and they don't respond. You ask the Home Office and they say, oh, we've got devolved powers with policing. I've absolutely no idea where we go, Ian, in all honesty, to get this right. But you know and I know that it's wrong. And you and I know that it needs sorting and needs sorting quickly.
100%. Listen, Harry, it's very robust stuff from you as ever. Thank you. Great to have you on. Great qualified opinion from Harry Miller. He's a former cop himself. He's the founder of Fair Cop. He knows what it's like to be on the receiving end of an apparent microaggression, and the boys in blue show up. I'm going to say it again. I always say this. I've never met an individual copper who supports this kind of nonsense at all. I can only imagine what goes through their mind when they're taught and sit down in a room. Here comes a worthy lecturer who's going to teach you about your white privilege, an absolute obsession with all of that stuff. And this is all sort of largely invented guff, by the way, just in the minds, in the sort of perverted minds of Marxist corduroy-wearing lecturers who somehow perpetuate this kind of nonsense. It finds its way into establishments and corporations. You have white privilege. You have to understand that. What do I? How does that manifest? And I've said this a lot, by the way. If nothing else, you might think by now, and white privilege, by the way, and we've interviewed so many people on this over the years, you might think by now they would have kind of changed the name of it, because I think that's probably what's most troubling to somebody. And if you look at the disposition of some people, the hell they've been through, whether they're a victim of crime, I mentioned the grooming gangs, whether they're somebody whose backstory has been really rocky and tricky, they've got naffle to their name, they've never broken a law in their life, and to be told they have white privilege is just about as crushing as you could imagine. You've got white privilege. Well, no, you haven't got a privilege because if somebody has more of a bad experience than you, if this is how the argument goes, that doesn't put you in a privilege. But the word privilege is just intellectually wrong. It's clunky at best, but it's obscenely wrong to say that you have privilege. If you're a victim of crime and the bloke down the road was, I don't know, you got kicked in the shins and given a black eye, but the guy down the road was given 2 black eyes, you wouldn't say, well, you have privilege over him because you're privileged to have. That's not the way to look at it. So if nothing else, all right, and by the way, nobody is denying racism. Nobody is denying that discrimination in all its forms is among us. No, nobody but an idiot would deny. But you don't have to go there to establish that. And there's the problem. 0344 499 1000. This is Talk.
What I would wonder is how you can argue that Hamas isn't a terrorist organisation if the definition is so broad.
Well, by that logic, Israel's a terrorist organisation. Do you agree?
No.
Well, think about it. Come on, man, think it through. If you agree the definition is very, very broad, then the Secretary of State could say, right, oh, clearly it applies to Israel.
But you said it about Hamas,
they're doing a genocide.
But you're arguing the counter
That's
to
quite
this.
Violent. I'm going to say that the IDF is a terrorist organisation. She could do that if she wanted. She literally could. But why shouldn't she? They're doing a genocide.
Why shouldn't she? It's not a genocide. It is factually not a genocide.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This from James in Hammersmith, who says, reference the Greggs nonsense. I was having a pasty and a coffee. I don't know why I find that vaguely amusing. A pasty and a coffee in the Putney branch of Greggs a couple of months ago. It was around school kick-out time. Two lads came in their full school uniform, grabbed two baguettes and just walked straight out. Absolutely blatant. Staff saw them do it, didn't even raise an eyebrow. These kids have no fear of the police or any authority. It's a kind of disrespect thing. I don't know. There was... yeah, I saw... I probably can't even go there, because if I explained it in more detail, I'd be bringing up another kind of category of people, and if I do that, we're going to set a whole chain up. But I saw an incident in my local grocer's store on Sunday when I was there with my little boy who's 6, who shouldn't really be around like that level of bad language and education of, what some people are like. But it was just kids, being massively, throwing products and tipping over sweet displays and the like. And just walking out again. And the poor guy behind the counter, who I vaguely know because I go in there a lot, I was explaining to him who these kids were, and he said, I'd never experienced that before. I said, well, there's clearly something going on in the area, because what you've just experienced there ain't that unusual, mate. You say it out loud and I'll get one of those knocks on the door, but I think you know where I'm coming from. This one here, a simple solution to shop theft and the police, as they are addicts to statistics. Any person who commits shop theft should receive a banning notice from the impacted shop or chain of shops. If they do it again, it then becomes an offence of burglary, as they've entered a premises as an intruder. As soon as the police get inundated with reported burglaries, they'll soon buck their ideas up. My name is Nigel from Wiltshire, by the way, a retired and frustrated police officer who used to put hundreds of shoplifters in front of magistrates. Thank you very much indeed, Nigel, for that. You speak common sense, but that's the bit that's clearly lacking from the wider picture. Let's go to Steve in Leeds. This is reference British Steel. Steve, what's going on? What have you got for us? Hi.
It is, Ian. Yeah, I just want to very quickly explain about Scunthorpe Steel. So,
yes.
British Steel set up in Scunthorpe because it was next to Drax and Eggborough and the Yorkshire and Nottinghamshire coalfields. So Drax and Eggborough were Europe's two biggest and cheapest to run coal-fired power stations.
Yeah.
So you got cheap electric. The coalfield provided the coke, which is what they also need, so you got cheap coke. And we were next to the North Sea on the East Coast, so you got cheap North Sea gas. So now, because we've got the highest energy prices in the world, that is no longer a productive business model. So even if we nationalise it, it's going to go bust. And I think on Saturday, Ed Miliband should have to stand up in Parliament and tell everybody that he sacrificed the whole town of Scunthorpe on the altar of net zero. Because that's what this is all about.
100%. 100%. But of course, he's not going to say that, is he? He's going to stand by his words, because that's what he does.
He's going to blame Donald Trump and his steel tax.
Yeah.
He's going to say, so the Chinese wouldn't get rid of that factory if it could make money. But our energy costs are so high, any energy-related business like that, like Port Talbot, they're doomed. Nothing you can do about it. They're just going to have to close it. And all that cost of all those workers and people going bust, companies going under in Scunthorpe, is going to go on the welfare bill. That's net zero for you.
And this is a neck of the woods that really could do without this. I mean, I know the area because I was born in Scunthorpe, so, and, you know, half my family still live there. It's an area that, you know, really it doesn't need any more kicks, right? It needs boost, and it needs it fast. So this is the last thing that region needs at the moment.
Well, without British Steel, there is no Scunthorpe.
Yeah.
Because there's nothing else around it. There's no industry, no nothing. It's in an odd place, is Scunthorpe, the middle of nowhere.
It certainly
is. A lovely place, but without British Steel, not only do everybody lose their jobs at British Steel, all the shopkeepers, the car mechanics, they all go as well. You may as well just empty the town and move them out. That's how bad it is. Yeah. So, but it's net zero. That's all it is, net zero.
Steve, you make it's an obvious point, but it's still a very powerful one, and thank you, mate, for that. Steve in Leeds. This is, of course, reference Parliament reconvening. They've recalled Parliament. This is very unusual. It's only happened a few dozen times in about 90 years that Parliament gets recalled on a Saturday. So they're on their Easter recess. They're going back in. They're going to debate this. What do they do with British Steel? What's the future of this? And of course, this is a lot of it at odds with Ed Miliband's absolute dream of, you know, steel. We don't need that kind of stuff, do we, really? Because that involves coke and that involves coal, and it's just everything about it is what Ed Miliband is, his worst nightmare. It's like the demons have been unleashed. Romero zombies are coming out of the streets of Scunthorpe for Ed Miliband. He loathes this kind of conversation. Close it all up, fill in the holes, shove concrete down the wells, make sure you can never produce this stuff. I mean, what a moron, by the way, to take it to that kind of level. Even, you know, some really decent environmental voices I know are in favour of what China are doing, for example. Yeah, China have got a high-pollutant set of furnaces and coal and God knows what. Simultaneously, they do more on renewals than probably any other country on the planet. They make more of it, apart from anything else. Solar panels, windmills, you name it. They're doing the whole thing. But what they've worked out is, like, we're not going to go nuts on this. Everyone wants a cleaner environment. If you can get your energy almost from the weather, then, hey, happy days. Ultimately, apart from the infrastructure, it doesn't cost you anything. So, yeah, we'll buy into that. But in the meantime, we're not going to close everything down while we're transferring to that. So we'll keep it going, we'll run it in tandem. And then, you know, eventually one day, 50 years' time, whatever it happens to be, we'll go, OK, look, the windmills are doing the job. Who'd have thought it? Solar panels, yeah, it's all working. Plus new technology and nuclear and various other things as well. That's a sensible approach. Not Ed Miliband. No, he's gone full on this one. He really believes that he's going to mark out the United Kingdom on the globe. Trouble is, no one in the real world agrees with him, particularly the people of Scunthorpe. Details on Talk over the course of the weekend as to how that sitting in the House of Commons goes. David Bull will be on air on breakfast tomorrow morning. Peter Cardwell following. Yeah, I can absolutely assure you, any breaking news that comes from that, you'll hear it here first on Talk. We're talking of tariffs and China and the like. We're going to investigate that. What does it mean for iPhones? Our technology correspondent, Will Guyot, is with us in a couple of moments' time right here on Talk. It's just gone 3:30.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
One here says the Greg shoplifting won't go on for long. Give it a couple of months and the thieves won't be able to get through the door. That's a very good point. Pete says, how much went out of that big pot to pay for Lindsay Hoyle's flight tickets? Fair question. On the cost of motoring, Penny says, I run an 18-month-old Mercedes C-Class coupe, but monthly costs are still only half what I pay to insure my 17-year-old cat. He's on a lot of drugs and costing me £386 a month. They're both worth every penny. Best wishes, says Penny in Andover. I've got to say, it's a cat, Penny. You know, it's not exactly a dog. I mean, the dog is the crown jewels of having a pet. It's a cat. But yeah, you're right. If your pet's not well, everyone's had that. If you own a pet, you do throw that. There's a friend of mine, the guy that cuts my hair, actually, he spent thousands on his dog, who's had some eye issues. And, you know, then they do the scans. A scan for a dog or a cat is more expensive than if you went to a private medical. If you want to get your arm scanned, it'll probably cost you about 300 quid, if that, maybe 200 quid in a private health thing. Get your dog's leg scanned, it'll probably cost you about 600 quid. How does that work? Why is the dog more expensive than the human? It's 25 to 4. Let's talk tech. Will Guyot, our tech correspondent, is back with us. We had a bit of a hiatus, Will, because we were off and then I was off, and now you return like a prodigal son, triumphant in your arcade of joy. How are you?
I'm good. How was Mar-a-Lago? Did you have a nice holiday?
It was all right, actually. Do you know what? Donny, he's so generous. He lent me his clubs. He didn't even ask for them back afterwards. So I've actually got a full... So I'm going to eBay these things. I reckon I'll get a few quid for that because they're all signed by Don.
And you know, you were talking about your barber a moment ago. Surely he gets enough money from doing your barnet every week to look after the dog.
Well, that I do believe I am accidentally paying for his dog's x-rays. So... there you go. Every cloud for him. Let's talk, talking of Trump, tariffs, of course, have dominated the news headlines. Nobody can keep up with it. Even hardened Republicans are going, we have no idea what he's doing here, but something's happening. China, tariffs, and, of course, the implications for big companies like Apple, who are wondering, hang on a second, is our phone going to suddenly cost twice the price because we ultimately bring it back from China?
This is one of the most interesting conversations I'm ever going to have with you, because every time I talk about Donald Trump, lots of listeners and viewers message and say, oh, guy, you're supposed to be here talking about tech, not your lefty views, don't talk about politics. The reality is, depending on the analysts you follow on both sides, this is important, both sides of the political argument, there's a suggestion that if the iPhone does come back to America and is not subsidized in terms of production in the first couple of years, the first iPhone, US-made iPhone, you'd be buying it for 3,200 quid.
Wow. Because obviously labour costs and all that goes with it of making it in America is far more expensive than making it in China.
Labour costs, unionisation, components being made out of Chinese zones of control, all sorts of stuff, like they'd have to build new factories to build semiconductors. Now, rightly, some might say that will be good in the long run for the US, but if you want cheap electronics, if you want cheap items, if you want stuff affordable at the price it currently is in the world, electronically speaking, you need to go to China. That's the only place that can make it at the price. You've got some movement into India, into Cambodia, and into Vietnam for the production of various items, but those were also hit with tariffs at one point. So Apple's, Apple's plan B was damaged too. Apparently, and Apple didn't confirm this, but this was all over the US media, they flew in a couple of plane loads worth of iPhones into China, into the US unscheduled, on the view that at least they'd have devices available to sell. Yeah. But we're in a situation where we're getting closer and closer to September, when a new iPhone comes out. It's going to be very interesting to see how it's priced.
Yes, how it's priced and what it looks like, for that matter. You know, it might be made by Bob in Wyoming, who's just kind of, sort of some Play-Doh affair.
Whiskey barrel.
Who knows? It's interesting because Trump talks a lot about, America first, and I get that. He's the American president. He's supposed to want to champion and advance the success of his own nation. But there's no country on planet Earth that has done better out of globalization than the United States of America.
No, and the irony in the fact that MAGA, Make America Great Again hats are made in China currently should probably tell you all you need to know. But the tech industry, it's a weird place for the tech industry, right? Because even if it's not an item being sold in the US, most stuff is handled with companies who have US interests. So, for example, the new Nintendo Switch 2 console, which you and I haven't spoken about yet, comes out in June this year, June 5th. It was announced about a week or so ago, and they did a global reveal with how much it was going to cost and the day it was coming out. The day after, because of tariffs and uncertainty, Nintendo, a Japanese company, said it's going to be on pre-order in the rest of the world and the prices still stand. It's going to come out the same day in the US, but we don't know how much we can charge for it yet. So there's this kind of uncertainty, and the price of games has ratcheted up, and the cost of buying stuff for this new console has gone up. Now, some are obviously going to say, well, of course they're going to do that because they can make more money. But Nintendo are making noises that uncertainty in global supply chains is what has caused them to factor a higher price for the console. So it's going to be intriguing to see how that comes through. And when you're a US tech company like Apple, Ian, and $300 billion was knocked off your market cap when Trump announced those tariffs, it shows you just how global a company like Apple is, and how, even if it's a short-term position, it's going to be impacted by some of this uncertainty.
Well, indeed, and even relocating Apple's supply chain to the US could take, 3 to 4 years. It could cost $30 to $40 billion, which does pose a massive... I know they've got a lot of... It's one of the world's richest companies. I get all of that. And as you rightly say, look, fair play. If this comes good at the end of it all, and what Donald Trump's long-term aim is to go, no, this was never about, sticking a plaster over something. This was about completely recalibrating, realigning the world order of how we do business. If that is the grander plan, then there'll be people in years to come who'll say, do you know what he did was actually right because he did achieve what he wanted to achieve. But at the moment, it's very hard to, when you've got companies like Apple, and that's just one of many, who are saying, hang on a second, you know, we do work slightly in the long term, but not, you know, not by the decade.
Yeah, and I think that's the huge challenge here. We really don't know how this is going to unfold, what the impact on pricing is going to be. But it does make you wonder, when there is a semiconductor factory in Newport in Wales, it doesn't make the real high-end semiconductors, but it makes semiconductors for everyday devices.
Yeah.
And there is a suggestion that that factory may close, and that it may move out of the UK because a Chinese company wanted to buy it. There's all sorts of uncertainty over it. It just seems unusual that in a world where we're sort of leaning away from China and saying, oh, Chinese technology is suspicious, and then trade wars, there doesn't seem to be any effort in this country to protect the industry and the tech industry that we have. And I'm not talking about companies making a website. It's the fact that, TVs, etc., microwaves, etc., they're not made, none of this stuff is made in this country anymore. A few companies still build them here. They don't make all the components here, they still build them. But we've lost all of that kind of capacity, and it doesn't seem to be any effort to kind of save any of that stuff. I guess it's the same as talking about steel, and the government have got really excited about the fact that there's going to be a theme park being built somewhere in your neck of the woods, and that's going to need a load of steel, but that isn't going to save the UK steel industry.
No, indeed. Well, that's why we need Amstrad to get the old stacking, get the stacking hi-fis back in, like they did back in the day, which were never really stacking hi-fis. They were just kind of turned the other way round, but nonetheless, you take the point. Here's an interesting story. This is kind of like Minority Report for real. This is AI predicting how to catch a killer, if you like.
Do you want to know what's worse about this story before we get on to the most dystopian nature of it?
Go on.
It was only discovered by a Freedom of Information request from a civil liberties group. The government haven't announced this anywhere. They haven't talked it up. It hasn't been discussed at, let's say, a police federation event or whatever. This is being done behind the scenes until a group of civil liberties investigators discovered it through a Freedom of Information request. And it's like the film Minority Report from 2002, the Tom Cruise and Colin Farrell movie. They're going to start trying to predict whether or not somebody's going to commit an offence or a murder before it's done. And they're doing this, Ian, by doing a test on, depending on what you read and who you believe, because it's not all fully confirmed, it's all been reported via a third party, between 100,000 and 500,000 records of criminals and those impacted by crime, although the government has since denied it's got any information about those impacted by crime, will be used in this investigation to see if over time, with algorithms and investigation, they can predict whether any of these people are more likely to commit serious offences. And by serious offence, we mean a murder. So at some stage in the future, if this works, does that mean you're going to get a knock on your door before you've murdered somebody because an algorithm has told a load of police officers that you have, and then you've got to prove to them you haven't been planning a murder? It all feels a little bit uncertain to me.
Yeah, and also, I don't know how you would pilot this, because if you piloted it, then one would assume that ethically, if your pilot scheme and you're sitting there where you've got your screens around you and your little joysticks and going, right, okay, oh look, Dodge Pop McDougal, I think he's about to carry out a murder. Are they going to wait until he carries out the murder, or are they going to stop him from carrying out the murder? Because I would imagine the latter would be, what the law would suggest you should do.
But I think they're going to have to wait to see just how many times a Dodge Pot and his friends carry out said offence to see how effective the algorithm is. It's very interesting. And what's most frustrating about this is none of this is being done in the open. Nobody's coming on your show and explaining to you from the government how this is going to work, who's impacted by it, etc. And it was found by a fantastic group of campaigners whose name I've completely forgotten, as you do when you're doing live TV and radio.
I think they're called State Watch.
Yeah, well, State Watch did the legwork here. The government hasn't said anything about it and talked it up. So It's going to be very interesting to see what comes from it, but it could be as dystopian as it sounds.
OK, stay with us, Will. Coming up from Will Guard, he's back with us in a couple of moments. What is the latest thing or item or object to have solar panels attached to it? And two blokes in Cardiff getting ready to launch a satellite. What's that all about? Find out more coming next on Talk.
The government are not focusing at all on providing that reassurance to our many family businesses, hard-working businesses that keep our local economies going in places like Keighley, where I represent. It is deeply frustrating. Business confidence is at an all-time low. Indeed, I was with one of my manufacturing businesses, a mighty business in Keighley, just yesterday, but yet the narrative that they were communicating to me is they are deeply concerned about the additional overheads that is being put on them by the government's choices.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is Talk. 0344 499 1000. I was just looking at the Mike Graham action figure. There seems to be a bit... Will Guard is with us, our technology correspondent.
Is that made in China, that Mike Graham action figure?
Well, you'd have probably spotted this yourself online, that there seems to be a bit of a thing at the moment. Make your own action figure with mixed results. So Faith, who's vision mixing on the show today, they just tried to make a Faith doll. I would say with mixed results. Would that be fair? Faith, is that fair?
Do you realise, can I pause and say, do you realise by doing this you're pouring all of your inner secrets and likes and supplying them to OpenAI, the owners of ChatGPT, who will then sell them for $1 bazillion?
What, by talking about it?
No, by feeding your information into it and making...
Oh, I see. Yes, you are. Well, Faith came out, I would say, in terms of if you had to, because obviously it's a physical assessment you have to make. And when I look at Faith as a person, as a real human who works with us and I've known for a little bit, if somebody said, what do you think of Faith? And, visually, if you had to look at her face and make an assessment, I'd go, but if I was actually looking at the doll, I would go, wow. I think Faith should market the doll. Although maybe trades, I do apologise, Faith. Maybe trades descriptions will jump in. But the Mike Graham doll is amazing.
I haven't done one yet, but Mike Graham and I would be competing for more plastic than you, I would imagine, Ian, if we were creating a doll. But I did see Mike's doll and thought, Mike Graham is not the type of person I thought would jump on an awful bandwagon like that. I was quite disappointed with his behaviour.
Oh, no, you can blame Chuck, one of our producers here, you'll be familiar with. It was his fault.
He's made all of you.
He's going in that department. Let's talk about solar panels, because I see solar panels in all sorts of places. Where I live, down one of the major roads, the A21, they're building some kind of solar panel thing, which I think the idea is it's going to keep the lights on the motorway bit. So, OK, if it keeps them on and it don't cost anything, apart from the infrastructure, that's great. But everybody's getting involved, including the Royal Mail.
Yeah, they've slapped him on a mailbox, and it looks like, I'm imagining what your car would have looked like in the 1980s when you were doing all of that redcoat duty and you just picked up that fat Doctor Who paycheck.
Yeah.
It looked sort of a bit space age to me.
That was the 90s, by the way, but let's not let an inconvenient fact
The Doctor Who wasn't on in the 90s, Ian, so let's
what
not...
do you mean Doctor Who wasn't on in the 90s?
Doctor Who finished in 1989.
It's still on now.
Yes, but it was not on the TV from 1989.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Sorry. Yes, yeah. Well, I was allowed to be a kid as well. I was younger.
Quite a tall child at that time. Maybe AI can tell me how old Ian Collins was when he was a haemovore, but I haven't checked that yet. But
I can check it for you. 17. Bless me.
You'd still be driving then.
I hadn't passed my test till I was 18. That's what I'm trying to tell you.
Yeah, you're lazy. This post box is a good idea that they've got the solar panels on there. Apparently, it's going to power a camera in the post box, where you can take a photo of a barcode on your parcel and it will open up a special chute. So rather than have to go and have a miserable time in the post office like I do when I'm flogging stuff on eBay or whatever, you can now do it through a select number of post boxes, and rather than wire them up to the national grid, they're going to try it with solar panels, and I think that's a really good idea. But just imagine you go there on a dark Tuesday evening and you're trying to put your parcel in there and it hasn't got any power. That would be quite frustrating, but hats off to Royal Mail for trying something new.
They're giving it a go over there.
Give it a go.
And tell me about two blokes in Cardiff and their satellite. This sounds kind of like, I don't know, Eddie the Eagle Edwards type endeavour, but I'm sure there's something much more sensible to it.
Yeah, I love this story. Two blokes who started off this idea as a prototype literally in their garage in Cardiff. They're going to be blasting their first example of this prototype they're working on into space via one of good old Elon Musk's SpaceX rockets. Now, this company are basically trying to create a micro factory that you can blast into space, because it's the thought that you can actually construct semiconductors and build stuff in no gravity. It's going to make it easier with less energy. So you could start creating things in space that we would then use back on Earth in products. And they think in time, now obviously it's going to cost them a hell of a lot of money to prove all these concepts and get it all going. But in time, you could have a really efficient process of having, floating factories essentially in space, creating certain high-end components for new technology. And I just love the idea. It's come from literally two blokes in a garage. They've gone and got funding, they've built a company, and they're now about to go and test their theory. I think it's fantastic.
Yeah, well, we need more. Maybe these guys will be, a part of the solution when we can't deal with China anymore.
Yeah, blast it into space, exactly. I think it sounds like a good idea. There's lots of people that blast into space.
That's very true. I was thinking, by the way, just during the break about Donald Trump. Is his idea and the tariffs, like we were talking about Apple, and maybe Apple is a really good example of this. I mean, ultimately, is his thinking, why the hell are we making an American product over there? Why don't we just make it over here? And then we would be the new China in that respect. I mean, I'm guessing that's pretty much the headline.
America can't ever be the new China unless he gets rid of unions, regulation, hours of work, all sorts of things. You're
slavery
never going to make
and all that. Yes, you'd have to.
I can tell you a very quick story, Ian. I remember doing an event in New York, and I tried to lift a box from the loading bay and carry it to my stand. I nearly got lynched by 7 Teamsters who told me it wasn't my job to carry something and I had to pay somebody else. It was a box, of leaflets, basically. So the US, you are never going to find yourself in a situation where you can make this cheaper than China. Never going to happen.
There it is. Listen, Will, thank you as ever. Great stuff from Will Guyot, our technology correspondent. That's it from us. But Peter Cardwell is here after the news.
Hello, sir. How are you?
I'm good. Have you got your own doll yet?
My own doll?
Yeah, your own doll.
Oh, yeah. Someone sent me it had 3 shirts, and I only have blue, pink, and white shirts, and Diet Coke in it. Yeah, it was good.
So you've got your own doll?
I do. Yeah. Have you not?
No, I've got a few pictures that have come around today. By the way,
I haven't got a physical doll. But I've certainly been sent the picture.
Yeah, have you not seen the Mike Graham one?
I've seen the Mike Graham one, yeah, definitely. Yeah, I've seen that one, but I haven't seen the you one.
I mean, that is very good, isn't it?
I mean, the Mike one is very good. It's got all the elements of Mike Graham in there, yeah.
This is all AI related?
Generated, yeah.
I mean, the kind of stuff you're talking about here, you know, we were saying during the, Adam, our producer, we were talking about it. If you wanted to get an image like that, just for, you know, for a fun promotion, you'd have to go to an ad agency.
Yeah,
It'd probably cost you about £5,000. It would take a week. Or you could just talk, not even type, talk it into your phone, not even a big computer in a laboratory somewhere. Talk it into your phone for 40 seconds and the same thing will arrive.
Well, this is the way the world is changing, and I think that's a theme, actually, of Drive today, because steel is changing in this country. British steel is changing, and certainly the major problems with the Scunthorpe plant mean that Parliament's actually being recalled tomorrow at 11 o'clock.
And actually, happens,
very, very rare. And on my show tomorrow, I'm on between 10 and 12:30. We'll have full coverage of that at the time. We'll dip in and out of it as the time goes on. But no, many MPs, I'm sure you'll be crying a river for them, because many of them have gone on holiday for Easter, but they'll have to come back from that. And tomorrow morning, Parliament sitting from 11. So we're talking about that. We're also talking about Keir Starmer denying watering down his pledge on grooming inquiries. That row continues, and the fact that I don't know if you noticed yesterday, I had an interview in my program.
I'm about to watch this on the way home. I heard all about it.
Yeah, it was
your fault, Cardwell.
It's all my fault. So we're going to talk a little bit more about that through a few clips, just for people who might have missed it, and also the police force, West Yorkshire Police, accused of anti-white bias. Well, Yvette Cooper, the Home Secretary, says no, they have a fair recruitment policy, all as well.
And Brad says, one of my lovely dogs needed a few teeth out last week, just shy of £1,000, because dentistry isn't covered.